Chapter 250. Have you ever thought of asking the Chinese to step forward and willingly fork out money to share the burden of the country? No, you don't have that kind of ability. So, no matter how jealous you are, you can only endure it, because you're not as good as Yi Qian. As a father, Yi Zhifan was definitely a qualified father. As a father, he seriously taught his daughter how to plan step by step. How could he win people's hearts? But the bad thing was that Sun Dongqing's personality and way of dealing with things had more or less affected Yi Ying. It wasn't too late to teach her now. But unfortunately, Yi Zhifan only taught his daughter how to scheme. He didn't teach her how to be a proper person. One had to know that not everything in this world could be obtained through scheming. Yi Ying didn't say anything. She just listened quietly. She looked like she was listening attentively, but in fact, her lower lip had already been bitten by her teeth, and there were faint traces of blood seeping out. Making her admit that she wasn't as good as Yi Qian was harder than killing her. Yi Ying fell asleep in the midst of this discomfort. She had bizarre dreams. She felt like she was sitting in a classroom, or at home, or on a train. She was on the same train as Yi Qian, but their roles had already been switched. She was the one suffering. At around 1 o'clock in the morning, the train started to slow down. This was to prevent another train from passing. The middle-aged woman sleeping on the lower bunk of Yi Qian had already opened her eyes. She and her husband took turns sleeping. When she saw the train stop, she gently touched the small black bag under her pillow and pricked up her ears to listen for any movements around her. Yi Qian was also in a daze. One had to know that sleeping on a train was not a good sleep even when lying down. She woke up when the train slowed down. When she climbed down from the middle bunk, she paused slightly as she was putting on her shoes. She looked up at the middle-aged woman who was staring at her. She smiled gently and said, "Auntie, you don't have to be so nervous. The more nervous you are, the more you'll feel that something is going to happen. It's not bad for you to relax a little." It was really strange. Even if a businessman was leaving with a huge sum of money, there was no need to be so nervous, right? She had only come down to put on her shoes and go to the washroom, but the middle-aged woman actually put on a preemptive look. After hearing what the middle-aged woman said, Yi Qian, who was no longer sleepy, crawled to the middle bunk and took out his toothbrush, toothpaste, and cup from his bag. He then picked up a towel and went to the bathroom. The washroom was at the front of the train. As the train rocked, Yi Qian, who was walking from the back of the train to the front of the train, slowed down a little when he passed by Shop 5. Under the flickering light of the street lamp, she glanced at the burly man who had bumped into her from the corner of her eye. There were 2 other people sitting opposite him. Her delicate lips were pressed together slightly, and her expression was normal as she passed by. After passing by a few more carriages and seeing several people sitting quietly, Yi Qian's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't suppress a very bad premonition. After brushing his teeth and washing his face, Yi Qian, who was completely awake, came back. He discreetly glanced at the few passengers who had just sat up but were now lying down. He quickened his pace and returned to his bunk. Chapter 251. There was not a single person in the front or back cabin. She wanted to ask the train attendants to keep an eye out, but they couldn't find anyone. This time, Yi Qian didn't disturb Principal Chen. She lay quietly on the bed and didn't fall asleep again. At 2 o'clock in the morning, when the train stopped again, Yi Qian, whose nerves had been stretched taut, quietly listened to her surroundings. About 15 minutes later, the train finally began to move slowly in silence. At 2:30 in the morning, everyone on the train was already asleep. Even the people on the hard seats were sound asleep. Not long after, Yi Qian heard the door between the carriages close with a creak. She quietly opened her eyes, and her left hand subconsciously touched the silver thread on her right wrist. "Don't move yet, girl." Principal Chen's voice came from the neighboring bunk. "Let's see what's going on first." As he said that, he pointed at the middle-aged man and woman on the lower bunk. In the dim light of the train, he made a gesture, telling Yi Qian not to disturb the other passengers. Obviously, Principal Chen also felt that something was wrong. Nodding slightly, Yi Qian remained in her original position, waiting to see what would happen. It was deep sleep time. Yi Qian could hear the middle-aged woman, who had been on high alert, couldn't stand the sleepiness of the night. She was snoring in her sleep. She was exhausted earlier, so it was normal for her to be in a deep sleep now. Someone started to move. Yi Qian could faintly hear someone being woken up. The person let out an unhappy scolding. In less than half a second, the scolding turned into a frightened shout. "What are you doing?" It was very loud, but it was covered up by the rumbling of the train. Only the neighboring bunks were disturbed. The people sleeping in the bunks behind didn't react at all. They didn't know what was happening in front of them. They were all in deep sleep. Robbery. Principal Chen sighed softly. Every time there was a holiday, there would be a lot of trouble on the train. Girl, don't act rashly later. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. Wait until we know who the ringleader is. It was impossible to ignore it. Principal Chen had also brought a sum of money with him to purchase books from all the schools in the province. The passengers in the first shop were all alarmed. Faced with the steel pipes that were shining in the dark, no matter how angry they could only obediently take out their money and hand it over. Motherf **Ker, that's all. Take off your pants for me. Someone only handed over a few yuan, which angered the robber who collected the money. He slapped the robber and shouted, "If I find out that you still have money on you, I will stab you to death. You guys are out of control." Seeing someone being hit, an old man couldn't stand it anymore. He stood up and said something. When the robber saw this, he slapped the old man's face and said fiercely, "Old thing, if you dare to say another word, I will kill your grandson." The old man had a 3-year-old boy with him. Being threatened like this was equivalent to grabbing his weak spot. Yi Qian's hands slowly clenched. Hitting an old man, threatening a child's life. They were really out of control. This slap on the old man's face also shocked the passengers who had been woken up. At the same time, they saw the steel pipes in the robber's hands. Some people wanted to stand up and criticize them, but they retreated because of the weapons in their hands. Chapter 252. Yi Qian got up and listened to the commotion around him. He whispered to the middle-aged man, who was clearly alarmed but did not move, "Uncle, you have a cell phone. Hurry up and call the police." His figure moved slightly. Yi Qian only saw him secretly stuffing something into the pillow cover. Then, he continued to remain motionless, as if he did not hear anything. It was obvious that he did not want to get involved, and he did not want the robbers to know that he had a cell phone. Yi Qian, who did not say anything else, smirked. Did he think that he could protect himself by doing this? Did he think that he could just sweep the snow in front of his door and be safe? How naive. The commotion in front was originally carried out in secret. When someone did not cooperate, the robbers, who were initially acting in secret, suddenly picked up the steel pipes in their hands and began to hit the bunk beds violently, producing a series of terrifying banging sounds. It also woke up everyone in the carriage. A few young people, who were in deep sleep and did not understand what was going on, cursed, "You want to die," and then went silent. In the darkness, the steel pipes occasionally glinted coldly. The young people, who did not have any weapons in their hands, chose to remain silent. "Put all your money on the bed. If you don't behave, wait to be beaten. Let's see if your bones are harder than the steel pipes in our hand." The robbers, who were originally coming in one by one, saw this. As they walked, they used the steel pipes to hit the beds in the entire carriage. They wanted to wake the passengers up first. The children were the first to cry out in fright, followed by the women's screams. Outside, there was a sudden clap of thunder and a flash of lightning. The pale white light illuminated the carriage for a few seconds. There were at least dozens of men of different heights and heights. Some were fat, some were thin, some were tall, and some were short. They held steel pipes and stood in the aisle of the carriage like fiends. All of them were cursing loudly. They used the steel pipes in their hands to point at the frightened passengers sitting on the beds, threatening them to hand over all their money. The middle-aged woman sleeping under Yi Qian's bed looked as if she had been brushed with a layer of lime powder. She was so pale that there was no trace of blood. Suddenly, she stood up and threw the bag hidden under her pillow onto Yi Qian's bed. She begged, "Daughter, you're a student. They definitely won't make things difficult for you. Help Auntie keep it. Auntie will get it from you later." Yi Qian didn't know whether to laugh or cry at her request. It was as if he didn't keep the bag for her, she would definitely ask him to pay for it after he snatched it from her. Was there such a good thing in the world? She threw the bag back and said softly, "They didn't even let off a child's body. Do you think they would let off a living person like me? Also, Auntie, put away your little schemes of Yan'an City's people. I don't want you to ask me for compensation when the money is gone." The middle-aged woman, whose thoughts had been exposed, had an unnatural expression on her face. She turned her head to look at her husband, who hadn't said anything, and her gaze fell on Principal Chun. Before she could say anything, Principal Chun said coldly, "In the face of a disaster, you're still thinking about how to scheme against others. It's obvious that you're not good businessmen." The middle-aged woman who had failed twice cursed in Yan'an City's dialect, "If you don't save him, you'll be unlucky for the rest of your life. I'm waiting for you to go out and save others now." Yi Qian heard this and his eyes turned cold. He looked at the middle-aged woman coldly and said in a deep and cold voice, "If you dare to take a step back later, you'll be unlucky for the rest of your life." Chapter 253. The people of Yan'an City were famous for bullying the weak and fearing the strong. They were all smart, but they were also timid. Yi Qian's cold stare scared the couple so much that they didn't dare to make any small movements. The middle-aged woman was so shocked that her breathing quickened. She sat next to her husband and whispered in a voice that could not be any softer. However, Yi Jian could still hear her muttering, "Don't call the police. Maybe if there are too many robberies in the past, there won't be any robberies in the future. Don't talk to me so much. Keep the money." The middle-aged man didn't even think about whether his wife was right. He just reminded her not to talk too much and to keep the money. In an instant, Yi Qian didn't have a good impression of the couple. Yi Ying, who was near the front of the bunk, was already sitting next to Yi Zhifan obediently. Her hands were tightly grabbing onto the corner of her father's shirt. There was not much fear on her face, but her eyes were full of panic. "Dad, let's not resist. We've already given them the money." Holding such a thick steel pipe, she didn't want to lose her life for money. Yi Zhifan gently patted the back of his daughter's hand. They definitely had to take out some money, but taking out all of it was impossible. "Don't talk. You're a student. They won't do anything. Dad will give you the money." Yi Zhifan wasn't the only one who thought so. Everyone in the bus thought the same. They definitely had to give them the money, but if they really took out all of it, who would want it? No one. Some people wanted to hide some of the money, but when the steel pipe came knocking on their beds, they screamed in fear. How could they calm down and think about hiding the money? When it was Yi Qian's turn to knock on the bed, the middle-aged couple was scared half to death. After the robbers left, the two of them were almost paralyzed. However, Yi Qian still heard the middle-aged woman say softly, "Thank goodness, thank goodness." "Thank goodness what?" "Thank goodness they didn't take away their money and mobile phone this time, right? Uncle on the lower bunk, you don't have to use your mobile phone to call the police. After 5 minutes, your things will definitely be gone. When the car slows down, these people will escape through the window. By then, it will be too late for you to call the police." After the robber left, Yi Qian reminded him again in a low voice. Even if she told the couple about their dangerous relationship, all she got in return was their indifference. His clear black eyes were already filled with coldness. It wasn't wrong to protect oneself, but he chose to protect himself when he could have secretly resisted. This was the coldness of human nature. Principal Chun sighed softly and waved his hand at Yi Qian. There's no point in saying more. Everyone just wants to protect themselves. His tone was full of disappointment and helplessness. After a short pause, he asked Yi Qian, "Have you figured out who the leader is?" "I just took a look. There's still one person who hasn't stepped forward." Yi Qian didn't look at the couple on the lower bunk. He lowered his voice and said softly, "The man who knocked into me hasn't stepped forward." In front of them, there was another person who didn't cooperate. In return, they were punched and kicked. They could only hear the person being beaten scream, but no one stepped forward. "Damn it, I can't stand it anymore." The person sleeping on the upper bunk of Yi Qian suddenly spoke in a low voice. It was a young man who had gone out to work. He got up from the upper bunk and walked downstairs. Principal Chun knew that with his strength alone, it would be like hitting a rock with an egg. He stopped him. "Young man, wait a little longer. Let's think of something together." As long as someone couldn't stand it anymore and took the initiative to stand up for justice, then it would be easy to handle. Chapter 254. If this goes on, everyone on the bus will be in trouble. The young man jumped off the bed, gritted his teeth, and said in a low voice, "If no one resists, we'll let these bastards have their way." The middle-aged woman on the lower bunk heard this. She rolled her eyes and said lightly, "If you're so capable, why don't you rush out now to uphold justice and chase these bastards away?" Not to mention Feng Liang's words, just her behavior of treating others like fools was enough to make Yi Jian's eyes as cold as a bottomless abyss, with only a little bit of cold light. In front of them, a voice familiar to Yi Qian could be heard. "What are you all hiding for? Your lives are more important. If these people are really ruthless, do you think we can win? The doors on both sides are locked. Who can get in? Call the police? It's no use. This is a mountainous area. When will the police get here? They've already left." It sounded like he was doing it for the good of others. He wanted the passengers to obediently hand over their hidden money. Saving their lives was more important, but it made Yi Qian's pupils contract. Take out the money as soon as possible and chase them away. Save your lives first. As long as you're alive, you can earn the money back, right? As the man spoke, he put the money on the bed. "It's not worth it to throw away your life for a little money." It's that man's voice. He's persuading them to hand over the money. When Yi Jian recognized the voice, a faint smile appeared on her face. He's right, but he's also wrong. This place is indeed a little far from the next station. Based on the current speed, it'll take about half an hour to get there. That means they have about 20 minutes to ransack the entire bus. Yi Qian looked at the young man standing beside him and laughed quietly. "Brother, what you need to do is very simple. There's a cell phone under this uncle's pillow. Borrow it and then call the police. This kind of thing requires the police to step in." He emphasized the word borrow to tell the young man not to borrow it properly, but to be forceful. They were all standing together. Yi Qian spoke softly, and the middle-aged woman naturally heard every word. She was so angry that her body started to tremble. She gritted her teeth and said softly, "How dare you? All right, if you dare to snatch it, it means that you are with them. Old Lu, hold on to the phone properly. This girl's heart is black. The next bus would arrive in 30 minutes. It would be great if the people in front didn't cooperate, because this way, they definitely wouldn't be able to snatch it from their side. When the police came, what if they alerted these robbers who valued money more than their lives? What if they paid with their lives?" Yi Jian, who was looking around, seemed to know what she was thinking. Her light chuckle was filled with coldness and ridicule. "You want to keep the money, but you also want the robber to leave on his own accord. Auntie, don't be too optimistic. If you call the police after they've ransacked everything, that will be a real loss. You won't be able to get a single cent back." These words were a real threat to the robbers. Principal Chen didn't say anything to stop them. He let Yi Qian intimidate the couple by himself. When the middle-aged man heard this, he said softly, "Block them for me. I'll call the police." He didn't feel at ease leaving the cell phone in someone else's hands. The commotion in front was getting louder and louder. The robbers knew they didn't have much time. They pointed metal pipes at the passengers and threatened them as fiercely as they could. Not only were the children crying in fear, even the timid women were crying. Chapter 255. The middle-aged man's hands trembled when he heard the voices. He stuffed the mobile phone into Principal Chen's hands and said, "Big brother, you're here." The train continued to rumble on. The Yuan City Police Station dispatched dozens of police cars on this rainy night. All of the police officers were armed as they rushed towards the train station. They received a report that a group of robbers armed with controlled weapons was robbing the number 9 sleeper compartment of train 6483. There were more than 10 of them, and they were robbing the entire compartment. The police did not alert the staff on the train. The person who called the police had made it clear that there was not a single train attendant on duty in the number 9 sleeper. Therefore, it was not advisable to alert the staff on the train. Therefore, they only informed the conductor to slow down the train when the police arrived. Principal Chen, who had made the report, leaned forward slightly and looked at the robbers who were robbing the compartments one by one. Then, he gestured to Yi Qian. "No, I'm the most suitable person to go." Yi Qian immediately shook his head and rejected the idea. "You're an adult and I'm a child. It's best if I go. Also, I have a self-defense weapon. I can protect myself. Also, I have my own considerations. My uncle." She had shown enough trump cards during this period of time. She had to show that she was brave but not astute. Yi Zhifan obviously had his eyes on her. During this period of time, whenever she returned to the recruit station after school, there would always be people following her in secret. If it weren't for the fact that there were guards at the recruit station, they would have followed her indirectly. She needed to create some trouble to make Yi Zhifan feel that she was nothing to be afraid of. This was because she did not have the ability to take down Yi Zhifan in one fell swoop. On the contrary, Yi Zhifan could create some trouble for her from time to time. When she mentioned Yi Zhifan, Principal Chen understood what Yi Qian was thinking. Moreover, this girl had the ability to protect herself. There was no doubt about this. He handed the briefcase that he carried with him to Yi Qian. "You have a good reason to be a teacher. This is the proof of your loyalty." When the middle-aged couple saw this, the expressions on their faces changed. One moment, they were conflicted, and the next moment, they couldn't bear it. "Daughter, you be careful." When the middle-aged woman, who had been minding her own business, saw Yi Qian step forward to stall for time, her face became flustered and her heart uneasy. Yi Qian was a little surprised. He lowered his voice and said teasingly, "I'm not used to Auntie acting like this all of a sudden. I'm just taking the initiative to give her money to buy more time. I'm sacrificing myself to help everyone. Auntie should be very happy." The middle-aged woman had a selfish side to her, but she was smart enough to know that she should choose what was best for her. Yi Qian used a teasing tone to expose her self-interest, which made her feel even more uncomfortable. She did not forget to say, "Then you drag it out a little longer." When the young man saw that Yi Qian was really walking over, he was worried and raised his voice. "Be careful. Don't worry, didn't I tell you just now? They only wanted money, not lives. Boss is overseeing this place. Hitting people is just a deterrent. If someone really dies, they won't be able to bear the consequences." It was because of this point that she dared to step forward. A student was not much of a threat to this group of arrogant robbers. Before they could leave, another person in the car was slapped in the face. "Damn it, where did you hide the money? You're not honest, right? I'll beat you to death." Chapter 256. Big brother, please do us a favor. This is life-saving money for my man. I beg you, big brothers, please do us a favor and give my family a way out. The person who was beaten did not dare to resist. He could only beg bitterly, and even knelt on the ground to beg for mercy. The inside of the car was bleak. Other than the crying of the middle-aged woman and the arrogant shouts of the robbers, there was no other third party's voice. If the voices of these two parties were blocked out, it could be said that the entire car was dead silent. Please, big brothers, my man is the pillar of the family. I only managed to get this money by pooling it here and there. Please, big brothers. The kneeling middle-aged woman kowtowed heavily and begged. But no matter how much she kowtowed, all the life-saving money on her was taken away without leaving a single cent. At the same time, the robbers laughed loudly. Not bad, 5,000 yuan is a large sum. After counting the money, he laughed mockingly. We don't have any money either. We're waiting for your money to save our lives. Your man's life in exchange for more than 10 of our lives. You're doing a good deed, ha ha ha. On one side, there were miserable cries, and on the other, there was unbridled laughter. The two extremes of laughter made many people secretly clench their fists. The mournful cries were too tragic, making everyone's heart tremble. But what was the use? Because no one stepped forward. If they helped her, if their own lives were threatened, who would stand up for them? When the middle-aged woman saw that no one stepped forward to help her, she asked for help from the people nearby. Big brothers and big sisters, please help me. That money is really life-saving money for my man. Who dared to agree? No one dared. No one dared to step forward. Even if someone dared to step forward, they would be secretly held back by the people in the same line, who would quietly warn them not to go out. After all, the robbers had weapons in their hands. If they were stabbed, they would lose their lives. All the exits were blocked. They could not even run out to ask for help. Ying was so scared that she curled up and only dared to take a few glances out of the corner of her eye. Coincidentally, the robber's flashlight swept over. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw the middle-aged woman who was kowtowing crawling towards them on her knees. Dad, raise your leg. Quick, raise your leg. She was afraid that the middle-aged woman would hug Yi Jifan's leg and ask for help. She was so scared that her face turned pale. She reminded him, we can't interfere. We definitely can't interfere. How could the robber give the middle-aged woman a chance to ask for help? Seeing that she was blocking his way to collect the money, he directly swung the iron pipe at her back. Just as the steel pipe was about to fall, a slender figure suddenly stumbled and fell. At the same time, she coincidentally knocked away the robber holding the steel pipe. Motherf ***, who is it again? The robber who had been knocked away reacted and was about to hit the person who had tripped over with a metal pipe. The robber who had pushed Yi Qian over laughed out loud. What are you hitting him for? He's just a student. He's scared and took the initiative to give us money. What kind of job is this? Jay is there? He who understands the situation is a wise man. Yi Qian stood up. She chose the right words to express her fear and make others think that she was pretending to be calm. She said, we'll give you the money. Can you return the money for saving this auntie's life? Yi Ying, who was next to Yi Jian, was stunned when she heard Yi Jian's words. When she came back to her senses, a strange smile appeared on her face. She overestimated herself. Did she really think that she was omnipotent? Chapter 257. Yi Jifan, who had already paid to avoid the disaster, looked even more serious than before. A few days ago, when he went to Liao Yud's house, his son, Liao Jian, heard them secretly discussing Yi Qian, and he mentioned something. He said that when Yi Ying arranged for him to go to the city to do something to Yi Qian, he didn't expect to be accidentally discovered. What scared him the most was that he saw Yi Qian climb from the first floor to the 7th floor with his bare hands, and then down from the 7th floor in the blink of an eye. He also mentioned that he had 2 delinquents follow Yi Qian, but the next day, the 2 delinquents were rescued by villagers and tied to a tree for an entire night. Yi Qian had a very good relationship with the military, could it be? Yi Jifan faintly guessed a possibility, and his gaze became even colder than when he personally handed over the money. If this girl really trained well in the military, was smart and capable, and had good skills, it would be even harder for Ying to surpass her. Then Ying would have even less of a chance of marrying into a rich family. Ying was so excited that she clenched her fist. The more this damned girl talked, the more trouble there would be. Just wait for these people to deal with her. As he helped the middle-aged woman up, Yi Qian secretly glanced at Yi Jifan. In the flashing flashlight, Yi Qian saw Yi Jifan's cold expression from the corner of her eye. She knew that Yi Jifan was paying attention to her as she guessed. That day at school, after thinking about it, she was too aggressive and should have restrained herself. With a slight sneer, Yi Qian said to the robbers in a negotiating tone, "If we give you our money, then can you return this auntie's money to her?" Ying almost laughed out loud when she heard this. She even dared to stand up and show off her ability to deal with robbers robbing her of her money? Yi Qian, oh Yi Qian, this kind of negotiation was simply wishful thinking, digging her own grave. Smart, was this the so-called smart? This is called being bold but not astute. There was a saying that the more one spoke, the more mistakes one made. This saying was true. Yi Jifan's eyes flashed with a hint of mockery when he heard this. The little girl was smart, but compared to Ying, she was still a little lacking. If it was this kind of thing, Ying would never force herself to stand out. It was probably the first time the robbers had encountered such a newborn calf that was not afraid of tigers. After being stunned for a while, one or two of them laughed out loud. After laughing, they said ruthlessly, "Little girl, are you bargaining with us? Hurry up and scram, or else we won't be polite anymore." Someone stood out and gave many people hope. However, when they saw who it was, their hope was instantly extinguished like a shooting star. When Yi Qian helped the crying middle-aged woman to sit down, a man who seemed to be a businessman walked out from the middle. "Don't make things difficult for a student. Take the money yourselves." As he spoke, a few people took out the money and placed it on the bed. They all wanted Yi Qian to quickly return to his own bed. If there was evil, there would be good. At least these people dared to stand up and speak. This made Yi Qian's dark eyes light up with a slight smile. In a voice as soft as a mosquito, he said to the middle-aged woman, "Auntie, when the boat reaches the bridge, it will cross that bridge. Don't think too much." It was impossible for him and Principal Chun to intimidate this group of robbers with just their strength alone. They had to unite everyone in the bus. Only then would the boat reach the bridge and cross that bridge when the boat reaches the bridge. Chapter 258. It was said that a group of dragons had no leader, and that applied to humans as well. As long as there was a leader, things would be much easier. First, it would be her student, followed by Principal Chun, and then the righteous young man. Presumably, the passengers who had helped her earlier would also step forward. This way, things would not be difficult. Furthermore, to catch the bandits, one must first catch the ringleader. But she still had to ensure the safety of everyone on the bus. Xia Jinyuan had once told her to never give the other party a chance to retaliate. The best way was to lead these people to the back and separate them from the passengers, so that they would not have a chance to take hostages to retaliate. Money was bait to the robbers. The more enticing the bait was, the higher the chance of them taking the bait. Yi Qian opened his bag and took out a few thousand yuan. "My uncle said that if you go to the back and talk to him, he will give you more money." He took out a few thousand yuan in one go. The first round of bait had already aroused the robber's desire. Now that the second round of bait had been put out, it was time to see if he could lure out the real boss who had not made a move until now. Principal Chun stepped forward and coughed softly. He said unhurriedly, "Come over here and talk. Don't scare the others. Besides, even if you rob everyone on the bus, you may not have as much money as I have. Who is the boss? Please come out and talk for a while." Money is not a problem, but if you hurt people, it will not be pleasing. Come, girl, come back first. Leave the rest to the adult. He waved his hand and gestured for Yi Qian to come to his side first. The leader of the robbers did not expect his job to be so exciting. When he heard this, he moved his arms and did not ask anyone to stop Yi Qian. He chuckled and stood up. The passengers who were sleeping in the same compartment as him seemed to realize something. Their expressions changed, and they all fled to the side like frightened rabbits. They did not even dare to return to their own beds. He shrugged his shoulders and walked over with a smile. Money is good, but boss, I have to see how much money you have. You want to send me off with a few thousand yuan? It won't be that easy. Greed took the upper hand, and the whole car belonged to him. The gang leader laughed wildly. Money? I have, but not much. I can give you 30 to 50,000 yuan. If you are afraid that I will do something, why don't you call everyone here and leave 2 guards at the front and back of the car? Wouldn't that be better? Compared to these fellows who only used iron pipes as weapons, Principal Chun, who had been on the battlefield and had secretly killed countless enemies with a sniper rifle, had an imposing aura that directly suppressed everyone present. When the gang leader heard this, the fat on his face trembled. He sneered and said, "Me? Scared? Everyone here is my people. If she dares to be dishonest with me, I'll play her to death." He pointed at Yi Qian and said, "Such a lively student. I'm sure it'll be fun to play with him." Yi Qian's emotions were stirred by her words. His dark eyes were instantly filled with hostility. Play with her? It seemed like someone had said it before. What was the final outcome? She used a pair of scissors to viciously stab his heart. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She looked at the gang leader who was walking over. Her left hand was already quietly grasping her right wrist. If he dared to move, she dared to move too. Chapter 259. She didn't hide her hostility from Principal Chun, who used to be a sniper. Seeing this, he gently patted Yi Qian's shoulder and motioned for her to go to the back of the carriage. Let the passengers at the back come to the front. This child, sometimes it felt like she had a lot on her mind. Just like just now, one sentence from him made her want to kill him. She had to continue polishing him. He and Uncle Jen would only feel more at ease on the battlefield if she could control her emotions and desires. If a girl didn't polish herself, how could she survive on her own? This was what Uncle Jen and Principal Chun thought. They both hoped that even if they weren't around, Yi Qian would still be able to live a wonderful life on her own. And this wonderful life had to be achieved by her own hands, not by relying on others. The 2 elders had been cultivating Yi Qian's independence, so much so that it gave Xia Jinyuan a headache. At that time, Yi Qian really lived a wonderful life, so wonderful that she thought that a life without love would be more perfect. The gang leader didn't care about the old and the young. He walked to the back of the carriage and blocked Yi Qian and Principal Chun. "Old man, don't play tricks with me. Hand over the money obediently. Don't worry about anything else." There wasn't much time left. When the gang leader saw this, his eyes, which were squeezed by the fat on his face, flashed fiercely. He grabbed a metal pipe from one of his underlings and pointed it at Principal Chun. "Hand over the money, quick." He then said to the other robbers, 3 minutes. Hurry up. They were going to rob him. When the young man sleeping on the upper bunk of Yi Qian heard this, he gritted his teeth and picked up a thermos filled with hot water. He shouted at the top of his lungs, "What are you waiting for? Are you really waiting for them to rob you?" After that, he pulled the cork out of the thermos and looked like he was going to pour the hot water out at any moment. Once someone stepped forward, it was like a butterfly effect. A few of the passengers who had wanted to step forward reacted quickly. They picked up the water bottles on the ground, and some even took out fruit knives as weapons to resist. When one person stepped forward, a second one followed. There was no lack of men in the carriage, especially those who had not been robbed of their money. They did not hesitate to step forward. The train was already slowing down. The robber, who was observing the surroundings, shouted loudly, "Boss, the train is slowing down. We haven't King arrived yet." The rest of the passengers had yet to realize what was going on, and even the gang leader had yet to understand what was going on. In front of them, someone gently knocked on the glass of the carriage door, and a piece of paper with words was stuck on the glass. When the robber who was guarding the front saw this, his expression changed greatly. He turned around and ran back. "Big brother, there's a situation. Let's go." The robber who had been standing behind Yi Qian and guarding the carriage door rushed out in a panic. "Boss, let's go. The car is going to stop, the car is going to stop." At this moment, the police of Yuan City were already waiting with guns on both sides of the railway. As soon as the train stopped, they would immediately surround carriage 9. Everyone in the carriage knew that the police were in front of them. When they confronted the robbers, they were no longer as afraid. In just a minute, the entire carriage was in a standoff. The robbers were no longer the dominant party. When the gang leader realized that he had been fooled, his narrowed eyes revealed an ominous glint. He said fiercely, "F***ck, they really played me. They even called the police." Chapter 260. There were still 15 minutes before the train would stop at the station, so the sudden deceleration naturally attracted the attention of the robbers. In addition, as Principal Chern had said, there was someone working with them, so the robbers knew that the police had arrived. After the gang leader shouted, "Call the King police!" He fiercely picked up the metal pipe in his hand and swung it directly at Principal Chen's head. Mother Ker, purposely stalling for time. "You're courting death." The robbers were all arrogant people. Seeing this, they all picked up the metal pipes in their hands and swarmed forward. They all wanted to beat up the old man and the young girl who dared to trick them before they left. The silver wire in her hand was waiting for Yi Qian to throw it out. One end of the silver wire was like a snake as it tied tightly to the metal pipe in the gang leader's hand. With another tug, the metal pipe flew out of the gang leader's hand and landed in Yi Qian's hand in the blink of an eye. "Principal Chen, this is for you. See if it's convenient for you." Everyone was squeezed to the back, and the front was a mess. How could Yi Zhifan have the chance to care about her? The king was already in front of him, so he naturally had to capture her. Her move really scared the gang leader. He stared at his hand that was still holding the metal pipe, then looked at Yi Qian. The muscles on his face twitched. It was obvious that he was extremely angry. No wonder you dared to ruin my plans after eating a bear's heart. You actually have some skills. Brothers, whoever kills this old man and the young girl today will have all the money stolen from just now. Although the gang leader was angry, he was still quite smart. He knew that killing people was against the law, so he didn't do it himself. Instead, he instigated his subordinates to do it. Under the stimulation of money, these daydreaming robbers, who were only in their 20s, suddenly became excited. They raised the metal pipes in their hands and swung them at Yi Qian and Principal Chen. The passengers in the back were tense. When they saw the robbers swinging the iron pipe at the old man and the young man, who were obviously trying to save the passengers, the young man in the upper bunk of Yi Qian shouted, "You bastards will burn to death!" As he roared, he poured the entire pot of hot water on the robbers. He started it, and all the male passengers who had hot water bottles in their hands did the same. They all splashed the hot water on the robbers. It was late at night, and the robbers were all wearing thin clothes. When the scalding hot water splashed over, their screams were even louder and more miserable than the screams of the passengers. They were all screaming because they were scalded. Women and men moved to the back. Quick! Joining the melee, the brave male passengers protected the old and young, and the women ran to the back. There were also timid men who ran after them. When they reached the corridor connecting the number 9 and number 10 cars, they found that the door was locked by a hexagonal lock. One by one, they slammed on the door. More than 10 people rushed over. The robbers who were originally guarding the door were so scared that they immediately threw away their metal pipe. They had no choice but to pretend to be passengers and squeeze in the middle. It was 3 in the morning, and the sleeping passengers in the number 10 car didn't move at all. Even when the passengers in the number 9 car banged on the door, they didn't wake up. The door to the number 9 car wasn't the only one that was locked. The door from the number 10 car to the number 9 car was also locked. Naturally, someone did it on purpose to not disturb the passengers in the number 10 car. It was unknown which passenger was agile, but after climbing onto the luggage rack, he pushed all the luggage onto the aisle. In the face of danger, a person's strength was limitless, and so was their wisdom. Using this method could be considered a way to prevent robbers from harming the old and young. Chapter 261. Some people threw their luggage, while others began to throw the sheets and blankets on their bed. This way, the robbers with metal pipes had no choice but to retreat. My bag, hubby, our bag. In the chaos, a woman's scream was always the most penetrating, comparable to the sound of a war drum. But no one cared, and it seemed like no one heard her. Even if they did. Who cared about bags at this time? Beating the robbers away and letting the police take them away was the most important thing. Yi-Ying, who was closest to the middle-aged woman, had been stepped on countless times and elbowed her in the chest countless times. She couldn't help but yell back, "You're still worrying about your bag? Is there something wrong with your brain?" A thin blanket suddenly covered her head. She, who was plunged into darkness, subconsciously tried to pull the blanket away. Suddenly, something hit the blanket heavily and repeatedly. A robber climbed onto the luggage rack and started beating people up. Yi-Ying, who guessed it, didn't dare to pull the blanket away. She didn't know who had kindly covered her with the blanket, but she grabbed it tightly with both hands and kept squeezing her whole body back. The middle-aged woman who had called out, "My bag," was also under the blanket. When she realized that there was someone on the luggage rack, she instinctively reached out to grab the blanket to protect herself. Who knew that Yi-Ying, who was struggling to breathe, would grit her teeth when she realized that she wasn't as strong as the middle-aged woman. She grabbed the blanket with one hand and used the other to push the unsteady middle-aged woman forward. The middle-aged woman, who wasn't on guard against her back, fell forward under Yi-Ying's force. When the robber who climbed onto the luggage rack saw this, he raised his metal pipe and swung it fiercely. The middle-aged woman screamed, and Yi-Ying's heart skipped a beat. Yi Qian and Principal Chun fought against the robbers and tried their best to protect the passengers. Yi-Ying, on the other hand, was thinking of ways to save her own life and let others suffer. "Boss, let's go. It'll be too late if we don't leave now. The train is about to stop." The train was slowing down. After the robber who was guarding the train opened the door, he shouted at his companions who were fighting in the chaos, "The door is open, let's go." More than 10 robbers faced more than 20 male tourists. The sound of metal pipes, loud roars, and the sound of metal clashing against metal drowned out the sounds of the robbers opening the door. Yi Qian had been staring at the 2 robbers who were guarding the train door for a long time. When he saw that they had opened the door, he kicked them off the train without saying a word. At this speed, they would at most suffer some pain from the fall, but they would not fall to their deaths. Moreover, her focus was not on a few small fries, but on the gang leader who had just arrogantly said that he would do something to her. If she captured the king, she would not be afraid that the police would not be able to catch the small fries. As the train slowed down, the dim street lights on both sides of the railway were no longer flickering. The light that shone into the carriage allowed them to see more clearly, making it easier to fight against the robbers. It also allowed Yi Qian to see the gang leader who instigated the kids to charge forward while he himself retreated, looking for an opportunity to jump out of the car. "Let's get off first. This place is small, so it's not easy to use." After seeing through his intentions, Yi Qian smiled at Principal Chun, who had no problem subduing a few small fries, and said, It's easier to stretch our muscles when we're outside. If she did not capture the gang leader, who said that he would do something to her today, then all her hard work over the past 6 months would have been in vain. Without blocking the escape route of the robbers, Yi Qian pretended to retreat and jumped out of the train with Principal Chen. Then, a few other robbers also jumped out of the train and fled. Chapter 262. The robbers who had jumped out of the train shouted as they chased after the train, "Quick, jump out of the train!" A few of the robbers who were on top of the luggage racks threw away the metal pipes in their hands and threw them over the heads of the passengers, who were huddled together. They cursed, F***CKU. Then, they jumped out of the train and left. Seeing that their accomplices had left one by one, the remaining robbers naturally couldn't stay on the train. They all rushed to the front and jumped out of the train. Outside, it was already raining cats and dogs. After the gang leader got out of the train, he sneered viciously and pointed at the old man and the young man in front of him. "Brothers, what I said on the train just now still counts. Who told their heads to explode? This money." He shook the travel bag that contained at least tens of thousands of yuan. "This money is for whoever it is." After getting out of the train, the gang became even bolder. The train came from behind them, and the robbers who were holding the metal pipes fearlessly chased after it. Gunshots were heard. The police in Yuan City realized that something was amiss and fired a warning shot. They quickly rushed over with their men. F***CK. When the gang leader saw this, he knew that it was impossible to deal with the old man and the young man in front of him. He shouted, "Go," and left first. "Just you wait. Sooner or later, I'll get my revenge." Since ancient times, robbers have always been afraid of soldiers. When the police arrived and fired their guns, the effect of deterrence was. The robbers who were murderous and wanted to chase after Yi Qian immediately scattered. They crossed the tracks and rushed into the darkness in the rain. Yi Qian's target was only the gang leader. After the gunshots were heard, he said to Principal Chen, "Your shoulder hurts. You can't get in the rain. Get in the train first. I'll be back soon. Girl, be careful. I'll get the police to chase after you." Principal Chen waved his hand and looked kindly at the fearless girl who rushed into the rain in the direction of her target. This girl still had a lot on her mind. When the gang leader said that he wanted to do something to her, he was so murderous that it scared him. She had to vent this murderous aura. She couldn't suppress it in her heart. Since she wanted to chase after him, then go ahead. As for killing someone, she wouldn't do it. When the armed policeman caught up with them, Principal Chen told them the direction in which the gang leader had fled, but he did not mention that Yi Qian had followed him. The train stopped with a long creaking sound. No one dared to move in the number 9 carriage, which was filled with cries. They were afraid that there would be robbers coming out with iron pipes to beat them. No one knew who said, "Let's go." The passengers who were huddled together were so exhausted that they felt like they had lost half their lives. Although they relaxed, they were so scared that they broke out in a cold sweat. None of them dared to move. By the side of the aisle, someone was groaning in pain while lying on the ground. The sound drifted into Yi Ying's ears, causing her body to stiffen. Her face was filled with panic. It was the middle-aged woman who was pushed out by her and spoke with a Yannan accent. There were many injured people on the bus. Some of them were bleeding from their heads. Fortunately, they were still alive and had escaped this disaster. "Money! My money! My husband's life-saving money!" Among the passengers, the woman who remembered to give her husband life-saving money ran over while crying. The aisle was filled with luggage. She crawled on all fours to get her money back. She was not the only one who had suffered losses on the bus, but she had lost the most money. Before she could walk out, she was stopped by the police, who rushed in and quickly arranged for the police to understand her situation. Chapter 263. Ying sat on the bed, still in a state of shock. She watched the medical staff, who came with the police, treat the wounds of the injured passengers. The passengers with bleeding heads were carried on stretchers and sent directly to the hospital. The passengers with lighter injuries were checked. After confirming that there were no major problems, the passengers were allowed to continue resting in the carriage. Why don't I see the female student who stood up for everyone just now? Wasn't she on the train just now? Quick, look for her. When the frightened passengers heard that the old man and the young girl who saved everyone were not on the train, some of them surrounded the police to explain the situation. There were also some who looked up and down the train to find them. The middle-aged woman from Yan'an City had a bloody wound that was at least 5 centimeters long on her head. When the medical staff stopped her bleeding, she grabbed the hand of a police officer. No matter how painful it was, she had to finish her sentence. "Officer, I was pushed out by a young girl. I want to sue her, I want to sue her. My conscience was bitten by a dog." The other young girl risked her life to save everyone, but this young girl pushed me out in order to divert the attention of the robbers. Although her voice was not loud, Ying, who had been paying attention, heard everything clearly. Her shoulders trembled slightly. She said to Yi Jifan, who was drinking water, "Dad, I don't feel well. I want to lie down." If she did not want to be discovered, she could not be questioned by the police. She could not speak in front of this middle-aged woman. She had to remain silent. She could only wait until the provincial police got off the train. That would be safe. After such a big incident, the police were very efficient. They arranged for people to guard the train and asked the passengers who were not injured and could pack their luggage to pack their luggage first. Then they asked the injured passengers who needed to go to the hospital to tell them what their luggage looked like and what was inside. The police took care of them and carried them off the train. Principal Chen, who came up with the police, knew that the passengers in the train were looking for him and Yi Qian. He quickly smiled and stopped everyone. "We are fine. The young girl is just a little bold. She was also frightened when she was forced to jump out of the train. She is now resting in the conductor's lounge. Thank you for your concern." Hearing this, the people in the carriage let out a long sigh of relief. The middle-aged woman who was lying on the stretcher and preparing to get off the carriage was also ashamed. "Big brother, you and that little girl. I will never forget you in my life." At the last moment, he gritted his teeth and said, "And that little girl who caused me to be hit by the metal pipe, just you wait." This was the attitude of someone who swore to pursue the matter to the end. The train did not move, and the passengers squeezed into the hard seats woke up from the heat. When the windows were opened, the wind and rain from outside blew in, bringing with it a chill that made many people fall asleep. No one paid much attention to what was happening in the heavy rain with thunder and lightning. As for why the train stopped, everyone was already used to it. The rain showed no signs of stopping. While the police were dealing with the matter in the 9th carriage, the police arrested several robbers in the rain and escorted them into the police car. The gang leader who was stopped by Yi Qian was no longer as arrogant as before. His wrists were tied tightly by something that he could not pull off no matter how hard he tried. The high school student who stood in the dark like a ghost did not make a sound from the beginning to the end. He just chose to hit different places: chest, lower abdomen, knees. He hit wherever it hurt the most. He hit him until he was afraid. Chapter 264. Big bro, you're looking for Lele? Aren't I with you right now? Why don't I see Lele? The silver wire in his hand was like a part of Yi Qian's body. It wrapped around the man's wrist. He raised his heel and kicked the man's chin hard. The force was a little too strong. The kick knocked the gang leader's lower and upper teeth, breaking 2 of his front teeth on the spot. His mouth was filled with the smell of iron. His right arm was tightly bound. Even though his right hand was not bound, his palm was riddled with wounds. The deepest wound was so deep that his flesh could be seen. He had tried to grab the silver wire, but he didn't know that he had used the wrong method. The silver wire had cut into his palm and left a wound. He couldn't help but scream in pain. Yi Qian couldn't hide his viciousness. When he thought about how he died in his previous life, his viciousness was still faintly cold. Her short hair was already wet, and rainwater flowed down her forehead. Her dark eyes that had been washed by the rain looked especially cold and indifferent in the rainy night. "Why wouldn't I be happy to play with you? Didn't you say you wanted to play on the train?" Her voice was so cold that it was as if it had seeped through a cold lake. Every word was like a blade that cut through the gang leader's ears. Fear rose in his heart at this moment. Yi Jian's hands were tied together, and as Yi Jian leaped behind him, the long silver thread was already wrapped around his neck. "Save! Save! Save me! Save me!" The silver wire continued to tighten, but his hands were also entangled by it. The more it tightened, the more his hands were pressed against his neck. He didn't dare to use any strength. If he used his hands, the silver wire would dig into his flesh and wrap around his wrist bones. His feet had only taken half a step forward when the back of his knee was ruthlessly kicked. The kick caused him to stagger and fall to the ground on one knee. The gravel below him was so painful that he felt as if his kneecap had been shattered. "I'm having fun now. Why are you still shouting for help? Isn't this what you wanted to see? It's just a swap of roles. You're the one being played by me. Isn't the process the same? In that life, if she had the skills she had today, she wouldn't have been humiliated by a villain. Why would he pay with his life in the end? Since she was reborn, she would never allow anyone to humiliate her again. Absolutely not." Her voice brushed past the gang leader's ear. It was cold and as sharp as a blade. The gang leader was so scared that he peed his pants and begged for mercy. "I'm not playing anymore. I'm not playing anymore. I didn't see MT Tai. I'm sorry." His neck was strangled, his hands were tied, and the pain in his knees was unbearable. Even so, he had to open his mouth and beg for mercy. "I won't dare. I won't dare. In the future, I won't do it again. Spare my life. Beg for mercy, I don't dare offend. Help." Yi Qian, whose eyes were cold and fierce, blinked lightly. His eyes were a little sore, and then warm tears washed down his cheeks along with the rain. It was as if something heavy had been lifted from her shoulders, causing her shoulders to relax completely and her back to straighten completely. A strong flashlight shone over. It was the police who were chasing after the culprit in the rainy night. There were about 5 of them, and they were closing in on them in an outflanking manner. Yi Qian slightly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His pursed lips curved slightly. As the vicious aura around him quietly dissipated, the resentment and hatred in his eyes also disappeared with a smile. Chapter 265. The police's voice, strong footsteps. The flashing lights were frightening in the eyes of the robbers, but it made Yi Qian feel as if his feet, which had been stuck in a quagmire, had finally been pulled out. In her previous life, it wasn't that no one had saved her, but she wasn't that lucky. "You're very lucky. If the police had come any later, I don't think you'd have survived." Yi Qian let go of the silver wire and smiled coldly as he retracted the silver wire that could save his life or kill him. As the robber gasped for breath on the ground, Yi Qian picked up the black bag filled with money that had been washed by the rain and walked into the darkness. In this life, the outcome of her previous life would not be the same. In this life, she didn't have to worry about being humiliated to death, and she didn't have to worry about whether or not someone would come to save her when she was in danger. Because she could finally use her own abilities to defeat the person who dared to humiliate her, making him unable to fight back, and she could finally walk out of that shadow, feeling relaxed and satisfied. The train had stopped for nearly 20 minutes and would leave in another 10 minutes. Principal Chen, who had changed his clothes, sat quietly in the conductor's lounge, listening to the cries and laughter of the passengers in carriage number 9. He looked through the window to see if there was a stubborn figure under the streetlights. In the carriage, Yi Zhifan gently patted Yi Ying's back as he answered the police's question. It was too chaotic. My daughter and I were squeezed in the back, so we had no idea what was happening in front. Officer, my daughter has a heart condition. We're going to the provincial capital to see her doctor. She was just frightened and finally fell asleep. You can ask me if you have any questions. She's just a student. She was scared out of her wits and only knew how to cry. How could she know anything else? He also took out the medical record. It was the City People's Hospital's diagnosis. Yi Ying's name and symptoms were clearly written on it. The police flipped through the medical record and returned it, then asked if he wanted the medical staff to examine it. Yi Jifan declined, saying that it was inconvenient for him to sleep. After the police left, Yi Jifan frowned and said coldly, "Ying, you always do stupid things at inappropriate times. You think it's flawless, but it's actually full of loopholes." Yi Ying, who was lying on her side and pretending to be asleep, clenched her fists tightly under her thin back. She did not answer and only kept her eyes open. The fear in her eyes slowly disappeared after the police left. "I'll go check on Yi Qian. She hasn't shown up yet." Yi Jifan knew that his daughter was definitely listening, but she had always been arrogant and thought too highly of herself. Just based on this, she was inferior to Yi Qian. Just as the woman from Yan'an City had said, even he had to admire Yi Qian's bold behavior. In that case, what gave her the confidence to be so daring? Not bad at all? Support from the army? Principal Chen's arrangement? He needed to personally verify and inquire about it. When he walked to the conductor's lounge, he saw that the curtain was drawn, blocking the glass so that he couldn't see inside. He placed his hand on the door lock and pressed it lightly. It was locked and couldn't be opened. He knocked on the door. "Open the door, Miss Jian. Let Uncle see how you are." There was no response from inside, but Principal Chen peeked out from the corner of the corridor. She just took a packet of calming powder from the medical staff and drank it. She's probably asleep now. Beside him was a police officer who was taking down his statement. Chapter 266. She's asleep? Is she hurt anywhere? I'll be worried if I don't go in and take a look. Yi Jifan glanced at the policeman who hadn't gotten out of the car. His eyes flickered. Ying was scared too. Both of them suffered tonight. Principal Chen smiled. He took out a hexagonal lock and opened the door. This child was even more scared than Yi Ying. Luckily, the robber opened the car door himself so that both of us could jump out easily. Although she was scared, her courage was commendable. It's worth learning from. She was curled up on the narrow bed. Her clothes were clean, but her hair was still wet. Her back was to him, so he couldn't see her expression. Let her sleep here. Principal Chen didn't let Yi Jifan continue to observe her. He gently closed the door and locked it with a hexagonal lock. She's still scared. She asked me to lock the door. Mayor Yi, don't mind. The little girl came back just in time. She really knew that Yi Jifan would come to see her. It seemed that he didn't have to worry about the little girl being taken advantage of by Yi Jifan in the future. Yi Jifan took a step forward and saw that the policeman who was taking notes was holding a black bag. It was still dripping with water. He glanced at the water stains on the floor and narrowed his eyes. There's some life-saving money in this bag. Police comrade, since you've picked it up, can you take out the life-saving money first? Headmaster Chen said in a low voice. He glanced at Yi Jifan, who had a complicated look in his eyes and seemed to be thinking about something. He let out a long sigh. The money to save a life at the hospital. Yi Jifan looked at the bag in the policeman's hand again. He asked Principal Chen, "What's wrong? Can't you take out the money and return it to the passengers? You're sure that the robber carried this bag with him when he got out of the car? It contains the money from the passengers on the car, right?" The one taking the statement was a policeman in his 40s. "We still need to find a few witnesses. Then, the money will be returned to the passengers." Principal Chen took a step back with a smile and said, "I can confirm that this bag was indeed carried by the robber. It also contains some of the passengers' money. As for proof, this Mr. Yi can do it too. Yes, I can prove it. Yu Jifan nodded. He could indeed prove this because there was his money in the bag. You can open the bag and take a look. There's an envelope inside. There's 1,000 yuan in the envelope. This is the cash that the robbers took from me. There was indeed one in the bag. The policeman looked at it and closed it again. He said to Yu Jifan, "Okay, come with me." It turned out that the bag was picked up by the police during the chase, and it wasn't stolen by Headmaster Chen or Miss Jian. After understanding the situation, Yi Jifan felt relieved. The train stopped for a full half an hour before it started moving again. Listening to the rumbling sound of the flute, Yi Qian, with his eyes closed, gently stroked the silver wire around his wrist. The corners of his mouth were gently curled up until the morning of the next day. The only person who could save himself would never be someone else. In the end, he could only rely on himself. In the provincial capital's great hall of the people, Yi Qian and Wang Mo received the award personally presented by the governor. They said a few words of thanks and promised to continue working hard. After the speech, she finally let out a sigh of relief. To be honest, she wasn't used to this kind of scene. Chapter 267. When it was time to take a group photo with the students who had been selected as Outstanding Communist Youth League member, Yi Jian's eyes inadvertently glanced down the stage and saw an acquaintance that she was not very familiar with. At this moment, his iconic peach blossom eyes were winking and smiling at her. Han Zheng, why is he here? Could it be that Major Xia is here too? He subconsciously looked around but didn't see any familiar faces. The photographer had already asked all the students to look at the camera and maintain a smile. After the flash, the smile was frozen. Han Zheng put down his camera and hummed a little tune. This little girl even dared to stand Major Xia up. This courage, tsk tsk tsk. He really admired her. After the photo was developed, should he send it to Major Xia who was far away in the snowy highlands? Could it be that he could use the photo as a bargaining chip or something? You're not serious, shut up. Sitting next to Han Zheng, a dignified middle-aged man looked straight ahead and scolded softly, "I'll arrange for someone to send you away immediately later. Don't follow me all day." Han Zheng snorted softly and said lazily, "Brigade Commander Han, if you agree to let me go now, I'll leave immediately and won't be in your sight for a few years. If you don't agree, I'm sorry, but I still have to follow you. Commander-in-Chief Xia is much more open-minded than you. He knows that soldiers have to be tortured. You should learn from him. If your son is successful, you'll be proud of him as a father." Brigade Commander Han's biggest headache was his only son. He didn't know how many other skills he had, but when it came to tormenting people, no one could beat him. He followed him from the north to the south, and he still had to go to Fujian town. Was this kid going to follow him? Who didn't want their son to be successful? He had to have the ability to do so. Commander-in-Chief Xia's son was taught by Master Xia and was extremely outstanding in all aspects. Last year, he graduated from military school and was sent to the army because of the all-round competition. He won the all-round king of the Southern Province military region in one fell swoop. With this ability, Commander-in-Chief Xia would naturally send his son to the front line without worry. "Dad, you don't really look down on me and think that your son is inferior to others, right? Let me tell you, I, Han Zheng, am also a man of indomitable spirit. Back then, you kicked me to military school. Now that I'm finally going to move up, are you going to stop me and make me useless? The transfer order has already been issued. What's the point of holding on to it?" Military orders, Brigade Commander Han Zheng. How could Han Zheng not know what his father was worried about? His father was just afraid that he would accidentally die at the front line. After all the students had left the stage, Brigade Commander Han sighed and said, "Let me think about it." Then he asked, "Why did you keep taking pictures of the girl in the middle?" Do you know her? Yes, she's a good girl. Master Xia admires her a lot. Han Zheng lowered his head and looked at the camera. There were still 10 rolls of film left. He would go out and take a few solo photos of her later. Dad, you have 3 days to consider. I'll leave later so as not to bother you. Yi Qian came down from the stage after taking the photo. He glanced at Han Zheng a few times and only looked away after confirming that Xia Jinyuan was not there. When he came down, there were still camera flashes. No matter how bored Yi Qian and Wang Mo were, they still had to smile until the end of the meeting. Chapter 268. The 3-hour meeting lasted from 9 in the morning to 12 in the afternoon. Yi Qian, who had been smiling the entire time, felt his cheeks stiffen. The end of the meeting didn't mean that he could leave. He chatted with Principal Chen and several leaders of the city's education bureau as they walked towards the provincial government cafeteria. Secretary Wu had already started asking where Yi Qian was going to attend the high school entrance exam. He also introduced number 1 middle school. Although the environment isn't as good as the provincial number 1 middle school, our number 1 middle school is the first school to introduce the internet to our students. Moreover, along the way, Secretary Wu wasn't the only one who mentioned number 1 middle school. The other leaders also did the same. It was clear that they all wanted Yi Qian to stay in the city and not be recruited by the provincial government. Principal Chao of the provincial government cafeteria finally finished his small talk with the leaders. When he walked over, he heard Yi Qian, who the school wanted to recruit, say with a smile, "Actually, I didn't consider going to the provincial government to study. Firstly, it's too far away. Secondly, it's not necessary. You ultimately have to rely on yourself to study. Whether you can get into your ideal university is also dependent on yourself. I don't want to go to a school that's too far away. I'll just study in the city." Principal Chao, who had wanted to say a few more words, sighed softly and said to Teacher Zhu, "She can even give up the opportunity to study in the capital. If she gives up the opportunity to study in the provincial government. Sai, let's go. This girl is a piece of gold. She will shine no matter where she goes. Not going to the capital or the provincial government." To make it easier for him to go home, Yi Qian chose to study in the city. When they were about to reach the cafeteria, Yi Qian saw Han Zheng standing under the shade of a tree with a camera around his neck. He had one hand casually in his pocket, as if he was waiting for someone. Who was he waiting for? Yi Qian couldn't help but look behind him. But there was still no sight of that towering figure behind him. He wasn't waiting for Major Xia. Han Zheng couldn't help but chuckle as he walked over. Did this girl think that he came with Major Xia? As soon as he moved, Yi Qian immediately whispered a few words to Principal Chen and rushed forward to greet him. Han Zheng had no choice but to stop himself from asking Principal Chen about her daily life. He stood under the sun and waited for her to walk over. She was a very vigilant girl who didn't like people getting close to her. From a psychological point of view, this was also a sign of insecurity. That's right. She had no parents, and she was cheated by her uncle's family. It was already very healthy that she didn't develop any world-weary emotions. Last time, young Master Xia asked you to look for me, but you didn't come. As for me, I don't have any other intentions. I just want to see if classmate Yi Qian, who dared to stand young Master Xia up, has any words that he needs me to pass to young Master Xia. So he was here because of what happened last time. Yi Qian smiled and said, "Are you going there too?" The provincial government building occupied a large area. Han Zheng didn't lead Yi Qian to the cafeteria. Instead, he brought her to a military car. "I don't know yet, but it shouldn't be a problem. Let's go outside and chat while we eat. You can even write a letter for me to pass to him." Yi Qian, who didn't refuse, quietly got into the car. She didn't say much until she got out. As Han Zheng drove, he glanced at the silent girl from the corner of his eye. She was really calm. There was no strange expression on her little face at all. You didn't go, but he rushed over the moment he got off the plane. Little girl, who knows how many girls in the capital want to meet young Master Xia, but you actually stood him up. You're making an enemy out of all the girls in the capital. Chapter 269. He even went there on purpose? Yi Qian pursed her lips unnaturally and shifted her body. I was in a hurry to go back. I didn't have time to wait for 2 more days. Sigh, should she write a letter? What a problem. She would be lying if she said she didn't feel guilty. He even went there on purpose to see her. It was wrong of her to stand him up. The unnatural expression that flashed across her face didn't escape Han Zheng's eyes. He majored in psychology, so he could guess what a person was thinking based on their facial expressions. She was embarrassed when he said it out loud. She felt a little guilty after knowing the truth, but there was no girlish sentiment. Compared to the disappointment on young Master Xia's face when he found out she didn't come, tsk, it was the face of a disgruntled husband. Han Zheng wasn't familiar with the provincial capital. After driving for less than 5 kilometers, he saw a decently decorated Cantonese restaurant and drove straight to it. He found a seat near the window and placed his order. Then he placed one hand on the back of the soft seat. His peach blossom eyes, which were usually full of smiles, were now scrutinizing her. He secretly observed the young lady, who kept her emotions in check rather quickly. Yi Qian drank her water unhurriedly and generously allowed him to scrutinize her. At first glance, Han Zheng wasn't a very handsome man, but his eyes were bright and gentle. When you stared deeply into the other party's eyes, you could only see his affection and deep doting, as if you were the person he loved the most, the person he placed at the top of his heart. When the expression in his peach blossom eyes became serious and serious, even his gaze became stern. Just sitting there, even if the corners of his mouth were slightly curved, all you could see was the coldness of a soldier. Classmate Yi Qian, it's obvious now that you don't have any romantic feelings for Major Xia. Of course, you can't be blamed for this. After all, you're still young. But Major Xia's feelings for you, how should I put it? It's not love, but it's already within the range of admiration, so... Hearing this, Yi Qian naturally interrupted him. Looking at him, she said with a faint smile, so I need to thank Major Xia for his appreciation of me. At the same time, I need to reciprocate. That's because Major Xia is the dream partner of all the young ladies in the capital, and I'm just a girl from the countryside. I have no background, no talent, and no looks. I should be deeply grateful that he has taken a fancy to me. I have to be tactful and go along with it. Only then will I be worthy of Major Xia's appreciation of me. Yi Qian said everything in one breath without pausing. Looking at his slightly stiff face, Yi Qian gulped and added, "It seems that young Master Han is standing up for a friend and fighting for justice. But does Major Xia know about this?" "Hey!" The little girl was so eloquent. Who said that he was young and didn't understand? How could he not understand after hearing all these sentences? That was indeed what he meant, but it was definitely not as sharp as what she said. Moreover, why did she sound so disdainful? She even had a sense of mockery towards him. It seemed that there was a misunderstanding. If it was someone else who misunderstood, it would have been fine, but not Yi Qian. Han Zheng, who rarely explained anything to others, smiled and said, "Little girl, don't be so prickly. For a big family like Family Xia, whether the girl has a background or not is not a problem at all. As for what you said about having no talent and no looks," Han Zheng winked happily and said with an amused expression, "Your little face is not bad. Your eyes are eyes and your mouth is a mouth. It's just that you haven't developed much yet. Needless to say, how could Major Xia's appreciation be bad?" Chapter 270. When Yi Qian heard him say the same thing, he couldn't help but laugh. No wonder you guys are childhood friends and speak in the same tone. Also, Don't praise me too much. I can't take it. What if I fall in love with you? Don't. Even if what I said wasn't nice, that's because you didn't hear what I was going to say next. Now that you've said it, my legs have turned to jelly. Han Zheng raised his eyebrows, but the sternness in his eyes didn't diminish. He said calmly, I'm childhood friends with young Master Xia. He's humorous and popular with women, but he has a good character. He's not affectionate and doesn't show mercy. In all these years, I've never seen him bring a girl to us. You're the first. Because of this, as a friend, I know that some things aren't nice to hear, but I still have to say them. His expression gradually turned serious, and his eyebrows became sharper. He does admire you, but if you're not interested in him, you don't have to be in such a hurry to draw the line. From a man's point of view, the more the woman he admires is in such a hurry to draw the line, the more he wants to conquer her, have her, and make her his. Men are natural hunters. Just like animals, they like to conquer. Young lady, if you don't want anything to happen with young Master Xia, I suggest you don't be in such a hurry. You should take it slow. Otherwise, young Master Xia will only become more interested in you, and it'll be harder for you to escape. From a man's point of view, this was indeed the case. And Yi Qian happened to be committing this taboo. Hearing this, the thoughtful Yi Qian waited until the first dish was served before slowly nodding. Hearing what you said, it makes sense. But Yi Jian changed the topic and smiled. But the way I get along with Major Xia is a little different. Even if I told you, you wouldn't understand. And I don't know you that well. If there's something you don't understand, I suggest you ask Major Xia yourself. Also, I do need to write an apology letter to him. After all, I was the one who stood him up first. With that said, Yi Qian got up to get a pen and paper from the waiter. When Han Zheng saw her coming over with a pen and paper, he was stunned. Wasn't it a little too casual? Using a menu as a letter, was that okay? Why wouldn't it work? At least Yi Qian was writing seriously. So, 2 months later, Xia Jinyuan, whose eyelashes were stained with snow, received the letter from Han Zheng. When he opened the letter and saw that it was not a piece of paper full of girlish feelings, but a menu from an unknown restaurant, he looked at Han Zheng with his snowy eyes. Under the thick windshield mask, his expression was, "Are you kidding me? I'm not playing with you, and I don't dare to play with you. Look behind you, look behind you." Han Zheng, whose eyes were blurred by the snowy wind, breathed out cold air. He wanted to laugh, but he held back his expression and said, "It's the little girl you admire who picked the materials on the spot." Also, he really wanted to know. The little girl said that the way she interacted with Major Xia was different. Just what kind of difference was it? The snow and wind were so strong that even reading the letter was difficult. Also, the paper was not only of poor quality, it was also as thin as a cicada's wing. He was really worried that the snow and wind would blow the letter until it disappeared. He carefully put the unread letter into his pocket and said to Han Zheng, who had been resting at the military depot for almost 2 months and only came to the training base today, "Let's go back first. The snow leopards will come out later." This was the world of snow leopard. They were extremely rare, and no one wanted to see them. Han Zheng's expression turned serious, and he immediately followed. Chapter 271. The base was located on a plateau, and in November, the only scenery one could see at the base was snow. Once winter came, the vehicles couldn't even get to the military depot, let alone enter the training base of the Snowfield Brigade. The Chinese government had invested a lot of manpower, material, and military resources to train a special force. For example, the Snowfield Brigade only recruited 2 to 3 soldiers every 3 years. If there were no suitable soldiers, they would rather not recruit than let unqualified soldiers enter the Snowfield Brigade. The Snowfield Brigade was a special force that had no organization, was not affiliated with any military region, and was so mysterious that some military chiefs had no right to ask about it. It could be said that it had outstanding military achievements, and no special force could compare to it. It was true to say that it was obscure, because you couldn't find out what this troop had done or what missions they had completed. Han Zheng was the last soldier to report to the Snowfield Brigade this year, and he was also the one who had been raised. Identity: Captain, son of a high official. Here, he was just like Xia Jinyuan. Whatever identity he had before, it was all over again. On the way to the training base, Xia Jinyuan didn't say much, but he emphasized one thing: forget your identity. Although Han Zheng was fully prepared, he was still stunned when he saw the conditions of the training base. Then he patted Xia Jinyuan's shoulder heavily and said with a pained expression, "We are wearing white skin. Will we turn black when we go back? I don't know if the sunscreen will work. I brought sunscreen with me. I don't know if you will turn black, but I know that I won't. As for the sunscreen, it's already -20 to 30 degrees. You can take it out now and see if it can be squeezed out." Xia Jinyuan took off his windproof mask and carried the rifle on his shoulder. He smiled at his childhood friend, whose lips had turned white from the cold. "Also, there is no fire here, and there is no electricity. There are only candles. There is a hand-cranked generator, but it is rarely used unless we need to contact the military depot. As for heating, we basically rely on shaking. Put the supplies in the corner. Remember, don't let any fragrance out because our wooden house is not sturdy. It can't protect against anything except wind and rain. This area is where the snow leopards are active. You have to be careful not to be eaten by them. The map is made of paper, but it is definitely the latest version and is purely manual. Train well. Z7, you have to adapt to the environment here as soon as possible. After 1 year, we will go down the mountain." Han Zheng, codenamed Z7, said with a serious expression, "Don't worry, I won't embarrass the country. Before it gets dark, I will see what she wrote. You can clean yourself. The other team members will be back in about an hour or so. Prepare the food." Xia Jinyuan, who had been here for 4 months, had completely adapted to the environment on the snowy plateau. After melting the snow on his eyes and eyebrows with the warmth of his palms, his jade-like handsome face was still exquisite, but his eyebrows looked more mature and restrained. Although the barracks were made of wood, it was still windproof and snowproof. Xia Jinyuan did not dare to stand in the wind and snow to read the letter. He stood at the back of the wind and carefully took out the thin letter. The first thing he saw was, "Good Luck Cantonese Restaurant." The little girl really knew how to use local ingredients. Although her thoughts seemed complicated, they were actually simple. However, she treated people with sincerity and did not feign civility. Chapter 272. Xia Jinyuan's gaze landed on the words, "Dear Major Xia," followed by "Hello." Xia Jinyuan felt his teeth ache. This girl must be doing this on purpose. She even used honorifics. The letter was very simple. It started with an apology, followed by a description of her recent situation. She also mentioned that she would be studying at No. 1 middle school for the next 3 years of high school and had no plans to go to the provincial capital. At the end of the letter, she added, Han Zheng took several photos of her and asked if he could get the photos back. There was really nothing else. How many words could there be in this small menu? Xia Jinyuan smiled and counted all the words seriously. There were 627 words, and he had to add punctuation marks. He thought for a while before coming up with 4 words. 627 words, not bad. However, this girl was really calm. He had already left the words, "Wait for him to come back," so why didn't she react at all? Did she not understand? No, she wouldn't. With this girl's intelligence, she would definitely understand. If she didn't mention it in the letter, it could only mean that she was avoiding it or thought he was joking. If she was avoiding it, he could think of a way to make her face it. If she thought he was joking, that would be troublesome. It was enough to show that she didn't believe what he said at all. He carefully read the letter again and committed the 627 words to memory. Then, he carefully and seriously folded the letter and put it in his pocket, near his heart. It was a pity that they couldn't communicate with the outside world. If possible, he really wanted to reply. Especially when she wrote at the bottom of the letter, "Major Xia, are we pen pals?" It was as if her clear voice was right next to his ear. It reminded him of every second he spent with her. There were still 8 months until the end of the year. By the time he went back, little Fox would be in high school. What a pity! She was still too young and underage. He put the letter away properly and felt his heart warm up. After a while, he turned to ask Han Zheng, who was preparing the bread, "Did she say anything else besides the letter? Also, how did she send the letter to you? How did she get the address?" "It's a long story. Brigade Commander Han didn't agree to my transfer order and is still in custody. Military orders are like mountains. How long can he be in custody? As long as I don't give up, he can't do anything. But it's not a good idea to keep holding on to him like this. So, I pestered him every day until I finally reached the southern province. Coincidentally, I saw your little girl in the provincial capital's great hall of the people." Han Zheng put away the hard bread and gave each of his comrades a piece of ham sausage. As he worked, he recounted how he met Yi Qian and what he said. "That little girl of yours is really something. The moment she opened her mouth, she asked what she should do if she took a fancy to me. That's why I said, 'That's great, we can still stay together.'" Under the gaze that was colder than snow, she couldn't finish her sentence. Although Han Zheng didn't continue speaking, his laughter didn't stop. She did say what she wanted to say, but my reaction was, my legs went weak. She really didn't say anything else. It was indeed the little girl's style to not talk to people she was not familiar with. Thinking of this, Xia Jinyuan smiled and said, "She is not familiar with you, so of course she won't talk to you seriously. The bread has turned to stone. I'll boil some water and cook some dried vegetables." Once winter came, the Snowfield Brigade members in the base ate bread the most. Occasionally, they would light a fire and put the dried vegetables in the water that would never boil. It was a vitamin supplement. Chapter 273. Once winter arrived, the Snowfield Brigade members in the base would eat bread the most. Occasionally, they would light a fire and put dried vegetables and leaves into the water that would never boil as a vitamin supplement. The training process of the Snowfield Brigade was more arduous than any other soldier in the army, but their abilities were not something any soldier in the army could compare to. Han Zheng was a person who could endure hardship. He shared the bread and ham sausages that were only enough to fill his stomach without batting an eyelid. Yes, she's a very vigilant little girl. So, I'm very curious. What did you do to make her smile like the sun when she looked at you? Han Zheng had a good impression of Yi Qian. With his status, he was used to seeing all kinds of people since he was young. He could tell whether they were real or fake at a glance. Take Yi Qian for example. The first impression Han Zheng had of her was that she was open and aboveboard. Yes, she was open and aboveboard. What he saw was not the exquisite beauty of her facial features, but the temperament of her movements. She was demure and graceful, without the weakness of a girl. She had a kind of open and aboveboard, dark and elegant like an orchid character. But she really doesn't have any feelings for you. I told her that you rushed over and didn't see her. But in exchange, you only made her feel guilty. Other than that, there was nothing else. Also, you really have to thank me. If I hadn't hinted to her and used her guilt to write you a letter, brother, it's very likely that you wouldn't even have received this letter. As he spoke, Xia Jinyuan listened quietly. The smile on his thin lips was like the sun on a snowy mountain, bright and dazzling. It's good enough that you can make her feel a little guilty. Take out all the things you didn't take out. The letter here mentioned that you took a photo of her. No way, she told you that. Of course, this is the way I get along with her. You won't understand. Han Zheng snorted and said a little gloomily, I finally became the magpie bridge between the cowherd and the weaver girl, but in the end, I didn't get any benefits at all. She even said that she wanted to use the photo in exchange for a few conditions. Who knew that a letter would sell me out? How exactly do you guys get along? Can you tell me more about it? What kind of way of getting along? From knowing each other to fighting side by side. They were friends and comrades in arms. If one day they could even become lovers who fought side by side, that would be perfect. A few silhouettes came against the snowy light, all of them bringing with them a chilly wind as they walked into the wooden house. The two people who were talking just now immediately calmed down and stood at attention, welcoming their comrades who had returned from their mission. This time, they were not only training in the snowy highlands, but also carrying out an important mission. The situation is not good. Tomorrow, bring some rations and take a detour. G3 spread out the map. His slender fingers gently traced across the map as he said to Xia Jinyuan, Q King, you're very perceptive. You'll go with J5 tomorrow. As for Z7, you're new here so you're not familiar with the terrain. Stay here and guard it. The company commander at the sentry post contacted me today, hoping that we can support them. You stay here and support the outpost. Q King, J5, and I are going to look for the 3 missing brothers. Han Zheng had no idea that he would encounter a missing brother as soon as he arrived. Listening to the piercing snowy wind, he said in a low voice, Okay, no problem on my side. I'll guard the back. I'll leave the front to you 4 brothers. Also, the military asked me to send a message to your sentry post. Chapter 274. He spoke in a low voice. One could only vaguely make out the words satellite, contact, and other sensitive military secret. There was no doubt that the message he brought was very exciting news for the Shuiyu Special Forces members who had been here for 4 months. This way, they would be able to contact the military at any time in the future. Next spring, the engineers will come over and finish building the equipment. We should be able to leave the mountain around July. Although Han Zheng didn't participate in the previous missions, he still knew what the Snowfield Brigade was doing. This was definitely good news for the Sentinel Company stationed at high altitude. G3 put away the map and patted Han Zheng's shoulder. Go to the Sentinel Company tomorrow and tell them the good news. They will arrange the reception for the engineers. We will be responsible for keeping watch in the dark. We leave at 6 tomorrow morning. Go to bed early after eating and save your energy. Z7, there are still a few oxygen tanks. If you feel uncomfortable, call for help. We will take turns keeping watch, and we'll wake you up in the middle. Han Zheng had been at the military station for almost 2 months when the snow had sealed off the mountain. But now they were at an altitude of more than 5,000 meters. G3 was worried that he would really fall asleep if he closed his eyes because of altitude sickness, so he told him that he would wake him up in the middle of the night. This wasn't an exaggeration. It was a real thing. Dinner was hard bread prepared by Han Zheng, a ham sausage, and a packet of pickled vegetables for each person. As for fresh vegetables, fragrant rice, hot noodles, don't even think about it here. At least the 5 of them still had food to eat. As for the 3 brothers who had lost contact with them, they didn't know where they were hiding in the snow. However, they weren't too worried. This kind of thing happened often. Losing contact for one day was still a short period of time. Later on, they lost contact for 3 days at most. It was under such difficult conditions that, in the spring of the next year, a confidential report from the Snowy Highlands, translated by Han Zheng alone, was sent back to the military headquarters. At the same time, a military layout map was also sent back to the military headquarters. This was the information that the 8 members of the Snowfield Brigade had exchanged for with their lives. They walked in the snowy mountains, accompanied by snow leopards. There wasn't even a small path. They climbed the steep mountains and the bottomless cliffs. They relied on their hands and legs to complete the mission given to them. By the time the news came back, spring was approaching in the north, and the cherry blossoms in the south had already withered. The days passed very quickly. It seemed that he still hadn't woken up from his spring sleepiness. He didn't know when the chirping of cicadas had started. After the general examination, Yi Qian did not stay at home like the other students to wait for the notice to arrive. Instead, he immediately returned to the village after the examination and joined the army for training the next day. Principal Chen and Uncle Zhen didn't ask about Yi Qian's results, nor did they ask her if she did well in the exams. When she said that she would go to the army immediately, the two elders took her to the army without hesitation. Results and scores had never been the focus of his attention. 1.5 years into the 4-year plan, and Yi Qian's training was getting more and more arduous. Yi Qian was standing alone under the scorching sun with camouflaged branches and leaves covering his head. He had a Barrett M82A1 anti-material sniper rifle propped up. He had already been training for a full 6 hours. Long-range sniping missions often required the sniper to run long distances without eating, drinking, or sleeping. Good hearing and vision were the basics, and at the same time they also needed to have extremely high endurance. Chapter 275. For example, she wouldn't feel thirsty because of the sun, wouldn't move because of frequent urination, and wouldn't expose herself because of insects. Fragrance came from the bitter cold. Theory learning, shooting training, skill training, and stealth training were carried out at the same time. Yi Qian had already completed shooting at stationary targets in different positions within different shooting ranges. Now, she was entering the dynamic shooting training. The so-called dynamic shooting training was the most difficult training. It required her to shoot at targets that appeared and disappeared at a certain distance within a set period of time. The passing standard was a distance of 400 meters, and the required time was 4 seconds. After 6 hours of hiding, Yi Qian was waiting for a mouse to appear. Finally, when the wind blew, a mouse suddenly appeared in the crosshair scope. In that second, Yi Qian's breathing tightened, and with a bang, she fired her first shot. This was also her first shot in the dynamic shooting training. As the mouse squeaked into the forest, Yi Qian knew she had failed this shot. Her willow leaf-like eyebrows furrowed slightly, and her increasingly beautiful facial features revealed a rare coldness of a girl. Holding a sniper rifle that could destroy a car's engine with a single bullet, and could also quickly penetrate brick walls and cement, she stood there and let herself be criticized. Your body's functions haven't been relaxed, and the preparation before firing was too tense. Also, 6 hours of not moving has already made you feel tired, causing errors in your vision's straight line and visual image, resulting in errors in your judgment of the bullet's trajectory. Principal Chen's voice was as cold as a bullet, without a trace of warmth. His eyes also didn't have the usual kindness. This isn't the original gun, but Yi Qian. You have to get used to any sniper rifle. Let every gun be your old partner, and every bullet in every gun can be close to your breath. Taking the sniper rifle from Yi Qian's hands, Yi Qian aimed at the target, aimed, calculated the wind speed, calculated, and pulled the trigger. Bang! After less than a minute, Yi Qian smelled the faint scent of blood. The mouse that had clearly escaped was finally shot by a sniper rifle. This was the standard of a world-class sniper. He didn't need to prepare for too long. He only needed one target, and he could complete the mission. This was also Yi Qian's goal. To surpass Principal Chen, she had to stand even higher. Yi Qian gasped softly. This was the first time Principal Chen, the first time he personally held a gun in front of her. It was so sudden that she didn't even have time to react before the world-class sniper's demonstration ended. Really? Amazing! Her face was full of admiration, and Principal Chen had a serious expression, so he lightly tapped her head with the butt of his rifle. Little girl, train hard. 2 weeks Yi Qian. The highlands, mountains, deserts. Mississippi. Mississippi Jian, you have to be prepared, the toughest days, Mississippi. Every place had different environments, training requirements, and shooting conditions. The external environment's temperature, altitude, wind speed, atmospheric visibility, lighting conditions, and other natural conditions would all affect the shooter's aim and the trajectory of the bullet. Principal Chen wanted Yi Qian to be able to hit the target no matter what the environment was. Although the environment could affect the accuracy of the shot, she had to use her excellent skills to eliminate the environmental factors, and she would be able to complete the mission perfectly. Chapter 276. There was only one factor that could not be controlled, and that was luck. This was the only thing that a sniper could not control. But what was luck? Luck was built on your daily training and your sniping skills. So, in Principal Chen's words, if you failed, don't blame it on bad luck. It was because you were not good enough. Bad luck was just an excuse. The next 2 weeks of dynamic training were even more arduous than before. Principal Chen no longer stood beside Yi Qian to guide her on what to do. Instead, he personally took the role of the enemy's sniper and confronted Yi Qian. Later on, Yi Qian recalled the training she had gone through in the past. She felt that this period of training was the most arduous and difficult. That was because she was facing a world-class sniper, not an ordinary sniper. On the first day, Yi Qian could not even find where Principal Chen was in disguise. He was clearly less than 100 meters away from her, but she did not know where Principal Chen was until she was hit by a blank bullet. Natural camouflage and artificial camouflage must be combined perfectly. Spring as the trees, summer as the shrubs, autumn as the dead leaves, and winter as the snow. This is the perfect natural camouflage. Headmaster Chen, who was wearing a camouflage suit, sat cross-legged. The sun was so hot that the skin on his lips peeled off. There was no water to drink, and there was no wind. He just sat there and gave advice to Yi Jian. Your sense of smell is very sensitive, so I deliberately rolled in the mud to cover up the smell on my body. This is also a way of disguise. Girl, remember this. Camouflage is a basic skill that a sniper must master. The quality of the camouflage skill determines whether a sniper can successfully complete the mission. This was what Principal Chen had learned from his own personal experience. He was so strict that it was almost harsh when it came to training Yi Qian. Yi Qian entered the true hellish training and approached the level of a world-class sniper. Her perception was extremely good. Even though she was sometimes killed by Principal Chen, she had only been using guns for a little more than a year. She was not like Principal Chen, who was a world-class sniper with decades of experience. 1 month after the summer vacation, Principal Chen left Shuku village with Yi Qian. No one knew where they went, not even Uncle General. The school's acceptance letters began to be sent out. When Yi Qian, Yi Ying, Zhang Wenli, and the other third-year students from the same village received their acceptance letters, there were only 15 days left until the end of the summer vacation. Village Chief Zhang Difu took the 6 notices from the postman, counted them, and said uncertainly, "There are 11 children in the village who are in junior high school." "These 6 notices, all of them?" "Village Chief, there will be a notice for those who are admitted to high school. Even if there are 20 people in Shuku village who are in junior high school, if only 6 of them are admitted, there will only be 6 notices." The postman laughed. Every year at this time, when the acceptance letters for high school and university were sent out, the villagers would ask about it. Zhang Difu sighed and nodded. Yes. Sigh, only 6 of them are admitted to high school. This year, none of them are admitted to university. Sigh, it's been hard on you. Come in and have a cup of tea before you leave. Village Chief, has my Yingying's acceptance letter arrived? I just saw the postman coming. Sun Dongqing's voice floated in from the yard. It was full of energy, as if she was afraid that no one would know that the postman had come. The postman, who was about to say something, got on his green bicycle when he heard the voice. He waved at Zhang Difu and said with a smile, "I won't be drinking water. I still have to go to other villages to deliver the acceptance letters. You should treat the mayor's wife well." Chapter 277. The postman was from the town, so he knew a lot about the mayor's wife. Sun Dongqing wasn't the only one who came to get the notice. Everyone who had a child in their family came. The adults were more eager to get the notice than the children. Ying was wearing a floral dress. She hadn't been out in the sun for the whole summer, so her skin was much fairer than before. She wasn't as flamboyant as before. She stood beside Sun Dongqing and looked very well behaved. Everyone in the village knew about the incident on the third day of school last year. Ying didn't come back during the winter break. She stayed in the provincial capital to study English. Now that a year had passed, the villagers didn't say anything. Ying had also kept a low profile, so the villagers forgot about it. Zhang Difu took out Ying's notice and handed it over. "This is for your family." He then handed over the other 4 notices. Come. These are for your families. The rest go away." 11 children and 6 notices. Naturally, those who didn't get in. Oh, Ying. She's from the provincial first high school. She's really from the provincial first high school. I knew it. My Ying will definitely get into the provincial first high school. Sun Dongqing looked at the school on the notice and smiled. She was not only proud but also disdainful. She glanced at the other villagers who didn't get the notice and comforted them with a fake smile. "It's okay. Studying isn't the only way out for this child. There are 360 professions. Every profession has its own master. It's good that she can work to earn money." It was easy for her to say that. If she really wanted her child to work, she wouldn't have come here to get the notice. No one argued with her. They had no choice. She was the mayor's wife. Go away. We're all from the same village. Can you stop arguing?" Zhang Difu looked at the smug Sun Dongqing and sighed in his heart. Jifan's wife was looking down on people more and more. Sun Dongqing looked at him with disdain and said coldly, "I'm just telling the truth. You need talent to study. My Ying was born to study. How can she be compared to them?" She then turned to the other 4 villagers who got the notice. "Look, which school did you get into?" Uncle Jen came in just in time to hear this. He walked over with a gloomy face. "Difu, give me Miss Jian's notice." As soon as the old man spoke, Sun Dongqing and her mother both stiffened. Zhang Difu smiled in his heart and said respectfully, "I was just about to deliver it to you. Is Miss Jian not back yet?" He said he would be back in 10 days. Uncle Jen took the notice and looked at the school on it. He smiled. Ying glanced at him and greeted politely, "Grandpa Jen, yes, I'll do better if I get into the provincial first high school. It didn't mean to study hard, but to learn well." The order of the words was slightly different, but the meaning was completely different. One simply meant to study hard, while the other meant to learn how to be a good person. Uncle Jen didn't like adults, but for a child, no matter how bad his character was, he wouldn't mind. Even someone as smart as Ying could tell. She lowered her eyes slightly to hide the coldness in her eyes and said obediently, "You're right. It wasn't easy for me to get into a good school. I have to study hard. Otherwise, I won't be able to get into a university." My Ying is so sensible. Uncle Jen, how did the little girl do? She had originally thought that she must be amazing since she had won an international award and the first place in the cohort. But in the end, she didn't come back with any good result. Chapter 278. Sun Dongqing waved the letter in her hand and smiled like a flower blooming on her face. Our Ying's grades are still the best. She got into the provincial number 1 high school without a hitch. Mom, don't say that. Ying seemed unhappy. She took the letter from her and stuffed it back into the envelope. She said to Uncle Jen, Grandpa Jen, my mom's words are unpleasant. Actually, she's quite concerned about whether my sister got into a school or not. Uncle Jen glanced at Ying, who thought she was smart but didn't have any sense of responsibility. He said calmly, It's not bad. Number 1 high school in the city. It's as expected. Number 1 middle school isn't bad either. Although it's not as good as the provincial number 1 high school, with my sister's intelligence, it's the same no matter where she goes. Ying knew that she was relieved. She really didn't want to be in the same school as Yi Qian. There was no other reason. Yi Qian knew too much about her. If he told others in high school, she would have to live like she did in high school. She would have to live a repressed life. Hearing this, Sun Dongqing held back her pride and pretended to be concerned. She sighed and said, As long as she gets in, number 1 middle school will be number 1 middle school. She'll just suffer a little when she gets into university. This is great. I can finally answer to my sister. It wasn't strange that Sun Dongqing could shamelessly take credit for herself. Another boy from the village got into the same school as Yi Qian. When he heard that Yi Qian was in the same school as him, he was very happy. He said, That's great. We'll have a companion when we come back to the village in the future. We won't be afraid when we come back together. Of course. My poor Ying. She has to stay in school for 3 years in high school. No matter what others said, Sun Dongqing would naturally turn the topic to her own daughter and praise her a few more times. A figure stood at the entrance of the courtyard and listened quietly for a while. When he saw that the people in the courtyard were about to leave, he lowered his head and looked at the high school study materials in his hands. He turned around and left without disturbing the people in the courtyard. Ying turned around nimbly. She seemed to have seen a familiar figure flash past the entrance of the courtyard. Her eyes lit up slightly as she stopped in her tracks. She wondered if she had seen wrongly. He only stopped for a moment before he quickly chased after her. There was no one outside, only the sound of a bicycle passing by could be heard. After delivering the package, the postman asked the boy sitting behind him with a smile, Didn't you just enter the village to look for your classmate? Didn't you find it? Yes, he's not at home. Gao Yang, who should have gone to Australia a long time ago, was already a big boy. Although his expression was cold, he still looked very educated. Uncle, you can just drop me off in the car in front. Someone is waiting for me in the car. Heh, he already has a car at such a young age. When the postman saw the license plate of the car, he couldn't help but take a few more glances. This car must be expensive. It's long and big, and there's even a leopard on it? Tiger? It was an indiscernible symbol. Gao Yang, who needed to go to Australia in 3 days, came with a pile of high school study materials. When he heard from Uncle Jen that Yi Qian would be back in about 10 days, he knew he wouldn't be able to see Yi Qian this time. His eyes were filled with deep disappointment as he looked out of the car window. His indifferent expression made the driver not dare to ask more questions. Gao Yang, who left with regrets, boarded the plane to the capital. Perhaps he would settle down in Australia, or perhaps he would return to China after he finished his studies. But he knew in his heart that he would never see that girl again. She was so determined that she would give up the chance of survival to others in the face of danger. She would be like a cinnabar mole, forever fresh in his heart. Chapter 279. When Yi Qian received the notice, it was the day before Gao Yang left for Australia. To him, she was the cinnabar mole in his heart, but to Yi Qian, they were just classmates, not even friends. Ying was the only one in the village who knew that Gao Yang had visited. She even called him the day before he left. Ying wanted to salvage her image, but Gao Yang still treated her coldly. At this time, Ying realized that not everyone could forgive her mistakes. Even Gao Yang, who used to like her a lot, would not let himself get to know her again just because she lowered herself and took the initiative to contact him. After hanging up the phone, Ying threw all the clothes in her wardrobe onto the floor and the bed as if she had gone crazy. She no longer screamed or roared like before. Instead, she vented her anger in silence. Yi Qian. Yi Qian. Every time she threw a piece of clothing, she hated Yi Qian. It was as if she treated the clothes as Yi Qian for her to vent her anger on. Every time she went crazy, she seemed to become gentler. In addition, Yi Zhifan did not hesitate to spend a lot of money to send her to the province to participate in all kinds of training. This made her temperament even more refined. Yi Ying, who was about to become a high school freshman, became slender and elegant. She gave off a refreshing feeling like a lotus flower. She constantly pretended to be a noble person in the south, while Yi Qian underwent dangerous and arduous training in the north. Yi Qian never knew that a person's potential was so limitless. He also did not know that after this summer vacation, her willpower had been tempered to be as strong as steel. From the south to the north, crossing more than half of the motherland, Yi Jian came to this plateau where there were herds of wild horses. Less than 10 days after coming here, Yi Jian felt so tired that she felt like she had shed a layer of skin. She was tired both physically and mentally. After climbing into the herdsman's carriage, Yi Qian collapsed on the thick grass. He was so tired that he could not even lift a finger. Principal Chern chatted happily with the herdsman. He spoke Tibetan very fluently, as if he had returned to his hometown. The moment he entered the Tibetan area, he was completely different from before. It was as if he was a native Tibetan. Yi Qian did not understand this language, which sounded like a paradise to him. He only knew that he wanted to rest, but his cerebral cortex was exceptionally excited. That was because in today's confrontation, her shooting speed was faster than Principal Chen's by about 2 seconds and she hit the target. This was the first round of dynamic training, and he was faster than Principal Chen. No matter how tired he was still excited. In July, the Tibetan area was as beautiful as a painting. During the day, the green grass, snow mountains, and blue sky were connected. At night, the sky was full of stars. Every star was shining with the brightest light, like a diamond that could be picked at any time. When the sky gradually darkened, the herdsmen began to sing. Their deep voices were powerful and high-spirited. Even if they did not understand the meaning of the simple melody, they could feel the passion for life and hear their happiness. To avoid unnecessary trouble, Yi Qian and Principal Chen disassembled their 2 sniper rifles and put them in their bags after every training session. They only carried a pistol with 12 bullets. From the south to the north, not a single bullet had been fired. "Miss Jian, we can sleep in the tent tonight." In front of them, Principal Chen, who was chatting with the herdsman until he seemed to have forgotten about Yi Qian, turned his head and said to her, "You are sleeping with Uncle Tsija's daughter, Yang Jin. You are about the same age, so you can communicate." Chapter 280. Yi Jian, who was about to fall asleep due to the rocking of the carriage, heard the conversation in a daze and laughed. "That would only work if there is no language barrier. I don't understand Tibetan at all. I'm afraid it will be difficult to communicate." She didn't understand Tibetan, and the people in the Tibetan area, especially the Tibetans who were around 30 years old, couldn't understand them either. It was better when they were outside, but now that they were in the heart of the Tibetan area, Mandarin was like a foreign language to the Tibetans. They had to rely on Principal Chen to communicate with them. "We will stay here for about 7 days. Girl Jian, you have to remember my wolf survival rule. As long as you have a wild nature and an enterprising spirit, there is nothing you can't do." When Principal Chen came here, the border between the 2 countries was at its most unstable. It was also the time when the lives of the Tibetans were at its most turbulent. At that time, the first requirement of the soldiers sent by the army was that they must learn Tibetan within a month. Learning Tibetan within a month, in the eyes of ordinary people, was something that was simply impossible. The Han people stayed in the Tibetan area for a year and still couldn't learn it. But for the soldiers, there was no task that couldn't be completed. They had to learn it within a month if they were given an order. If they couldn't learn it, they would be punished by military law. Principal Chun learned it within a month, and Yi Qian had been in the Tibetan area for more than 10 days. She would leave in another 10 days. Although he didn't ask her to learn it, since Yi Qian mentioned the communication barrier, how to solve it was up to Yi Qian. The wolf survival rule. First, you have to know what you need. Under the premise of what you need to get, you have to know if you need to have something. Sharpen your fangs, sharp claws, and develop excellent survival skills and a strong physique. These are the prerequisites for what you need. You need to possess them. Language communication is also a survival skill. Since you found it troublesome, then if you want to communicate with the Tibetans without any barriers, you have to learn Tibetan and clear the barrier. Yi Qian immediately understood. She had a ready-made teacher beside her, but she didn't think of it. My home is right in front. There's warm milk, fragrant beef jerky, and endless mutton. Eat whatever you want. The herdsman was about the same age as Principal Chun, but he looked more than 10 years older than Principal Chun. This had a lot to do with the local environment. Principal Chun laughed and replied, "And the strongest liquor." This sentence ignited the passion of the herdsman, because this was the first time he met a Han Chinese who said that he wanted to drink the strongest wine in the no man's land. It must be known that the greatest danger to the Han people living in the plains was altitude sickness, and drinking alcohol was absolutely forbidden. The laughter in the carriage never stopped, and it was blown far away by the night wind. The temperature in July was neither hot nor cold in the no man's land, but it was also the rainy season. There would be occasional showers during the day and at night as well. The rain came at the drop of a hat. One second it was a starry sky and the next it was a torrential downpour. The Tibetans were already used to it, but Yi Qian was still not used to it even after so many days. The rain beat against the tent, and the temperature dropped sharply. Yi Qian put on thick Tibetan clothing, and the Han girl became a Tibetan girl. Chapter 281. Although she had been basking in the sun for more than 10 days, her skin, which was naturally resistant to tanning, was as white as a peach blossom petal. Dressed in a gorgeous Kuba costume, she was so beautiful that Yang Jin's eyes widened. She said the same words several times in a row, which made Principal Chun laugh out loud. "Girl," Yang Jin said, "that you are a goddess who came down from Tianshan Mountain. You are very beautiful." How could she not be beautiful? She didn't need to draw on her dark, willow-like eyebrows. Her lips were vermilion, her eyes were like stars, and her teeth were like cinnabar shells. Her palm-sized face had beautiful facial features. She was a natural beauty that didn't need any makeup. However, when she smiled, she was as gorgeous as a peony blossoming. She was beautiful without being seductive. In the Kuba costume, Yi Qian was indeed much more beautiful than usual. What made people unable to take their eyes off her was her temperament. She stood upright with a valiant aura that made people feel at ease. However, she also had the gentle beauty of a girl. She was both strong and soft, and it was hard to tell whether she was a man or a woman. Yang Jin smiled until her eyes turned into crescents. She took Yi Qian's hand and made her sit on a natural wool mat. The nimble girl began to braid Yi Qian's hair. She generously took out a Tibetan headdress and put it on Yi Qian. Yi Jian had once read a piece of news saying that the things that the Tibetans wore on their heads were all historical and could not be measured by money. When she saw Yang Jin holding an extremely beautiful agate headdress, Yi Qian quickly pointed to a headdress made of leather, indicating that she preferred this one. Yang Jin pursed her lips and smiled. She replaced the agate headdress with leather. On the other side, Principal Chun, who was drinking Highland barley wine, saw this and secretly gave Yi Qian a thumbs up. She was quite knowledgeable. She knew that it was an expensive headdress and only chose a leather headdress. After the rain, the entire night sky became clearer after being washed by the water. The stars appeared again, allowing the few people who were taking shelter from the rain to walk out from under the rock. They wiped away the rainwater that splashed on their faces, looked up at the starry sky, and started walking again. Looks like it's going to be difficult to find them tonight, Xia Jinyuan said coldly. Under the night sky, his posture was like a sword that had been unsheathed, bringing with it a sense of dominance. Z7, check the coordinates. Han Zheng, codenamed Z7, took out a military compass. After looking at it, he calculated his position and quickly found their exact location on the military map. He spread the map on his big map, turned on the headlight on his helmet, and said in a low voice, "The east side is the river, we can't go that way, it's a dead end. The south side is our military depot, we can't go there either, there's only this way, north. There's a small village of nomads. If I were this group of people, I would choose to go to the village at night. There are still 20 kilometers to go. The journey will take about 3 to 4 hours. These guys had good stamina, so they would arrive in about 3 hours. No man's land, this was the only place to stay. Also, this area is where the snow wolves are active. Be careful." J5 took off his boots and poured out the water. He smiled and said, "We can't enter the village after them. We have to enter the village before them. Z7, see if there's a shortcut we can take." "We have to take a shortcut." No one objected to his suggestion, but there was a big problem. The shortcut after entering the no man's land was not as simple as taking a shortcut on the plains. The no man's land was full of unknowns at night. There were dangers that you couldn't see. The mountains you saw during the day were magnificent, but at night they gave you fear, the fear of approaching death. Chapter 282. If they took a shortcut, they might get lost, or they might walk into a dangerous area with falling rocks. These were all things that were very likely to happen. Han Zheng looked at the map carefully again and said, "Let's take the main road. We can't take a shortcut. Brothers, it's better to be careful. We'd rather speed up and stop them than take a shortcut." He was a living map. He could remember all the maps sent back by the satellite. If there were any discrepancies, he could combine it with the military map and it would be almost accurate. But even so, they couldn't take a shortcut. The unknown in the dark was impossible to defend against. Fighting in the cold areas of the highlands emphasized on light weapons to reduce the burden of weapons on the soldiers. Therefore, from the beginning to the end, they carried carbon fiber cases, stainless steel barrels, and carbon rifles with an empty weight of less than 1.78 kilograms. G3 slung the rifle over his shoulder and said in a hoarse voice, "Stop wasting time. They must have run away by now." He turned around and looked at K7. "Can you still hold on? If you can't, let J5 stay with you. The three of us will chase after them." K7 was injured and was not suitable for long-distance tracking. However, the situation of the people chasing this time was special. K7 was the most proficient in Tibetan among the 5 of them. With him around, communication was not a problem. "Let's go. If we can't, I'll rest." K7 waved his hand. In the dark, there seemed to be something burning in his eyes. A total of 7 people. They injured 6 of the border guards and killed 4 of them. There must be a master among them. This was also the reason why the Snowfield Brigade was sent out. To be able to kill 4 soldiers and injure 6 of them. This was not something a normal person could do. The country had always been strict with the border guards training. First, it was to protect the border. Second, it was to survive, not to sacrifice. The 20-kilometer Highland Road was much more difficult than the plains. No man's land was called the main road, but sharp rocks were everywhere. If the military boots walked too fast, Not only would they cut through the leather, but they would also cut their feet until they bled. After chasing for about 5 kilometers, they found a few empty bullets and a few drops of blood on the side of a rock. Xia Jinyuan raised his hand, and the 4 of them stood guard in front and behind them. He squatted down and bent down on one knee to pick up the empty bullet. He took off his gloves and gently wiped the blood stains with his fingers. North Korea's .556 caliber bullet is the same as the one found at the border station. When someone was injured, they pried open the bullet and took out the gunpowder inside to stop bleeding and reduce inflammation. They don't have any common medical supplies. Picking up the bullet in his hand, Xia Jinyuan's eyes were as sharp and cold as an eagle circling in the sky. You won't be able to walk fast with an injured person. Speed up. Tell me if K7 feels uncomfortable. G3 put away his carbon rifle and pointed it down. He said sternly, "There's enough time to catch up. Z7, you accompany K7. Xia Jinyuan and J5 nodded lightly. Their military boots stepped on the gravel. Their tall and slender figures were as strong as snow leopards in the highlands. They chased after the murderer for thousands of miles with a murderous aura. The soldiers of the Snowfield Brigade were not soldiers from the military station. They had killed people before. When they moved, they had a murderous aura that could sometimes make wolves retreat. K7 was injured in his calf. The stitches had just been removed, so it was not suitable for him to chase after the murderer for thousands of miles. But for the murderer and to avenge his fallen comrades, he had to persevere no matter how painful it was. Chapter 283. The wind blew from the edge of the snowy mountain. There was a faint smell of blood in the wind that had the smell of snow, which made the 5 people chasing after the culprit look cold. They were less than 10 miles away from the village. If there was a strong smell of blood, it meant that either something had happened to the culprit, or something had happened to the herder. The 5 of them were more inclined towards the latter. Alert! K7, bring up the rear. J5, cover. Xia Jinyuan's cold voice came from the headset. He graduated from the Combat Command faculty and was more professional than G3. In the past year or so, he could be said to be the team leader of the Snowfield Brigade. His sensitivity to danger, his ability to command battles, and his ability to deploy troops perfectly fused his expertise with practice. Not only did he allow this group of soldiers to complete their own missions, but he also allowed the military to assign them to some confidential military projects in the depths of the snowy mountains. The culprit this time was a group of mercenaries with bad intentions. They had shot and killed the sentinels. It was normal for mercenaries to kill civilians. Similar incidents happened all over the world. Following the smell of blood, they saw the body of a herder lying quietly by the sharp rocks. His Tibetan uniform had been taken away, as well as his accessories. Mercenaries had always been good at anti-reconnaissance. Not only did they take off the herder's clothes, they also took his hat, shoes, waist knife, and flint scythe. Disguising as a Tibetan, we can definitely enter the village. Xia Jinyuan opened his military backpack, took out a medical bandage, and gently placed it on the herder's face. They couldn't bring him back to the village. They could only come back after they dealt with the mercenaries. On the other side, K7 found a few drops of blood with some white powder floating on them. He used a military dagger to pick up some of the powder and rubbed it with his hand. Sterilized crystal sulfonamide. Check if the herder has any injuries. Sterilized crystal sulfonamide was commonly known as anti-inflammatory powder. It was a prescription drug used to prevent wound infections. If mercenaries used gunpowder from bullets to treat wounds, then it was very likely that the anti-inflammatory powder came from the herder. After checking that the herdsmen were not injured, they did not delay for too long. 2 minutes later, they started to walk again. On the road, they saw the grass that had been thrown on both sides of the road, as well as the wheels on the ground. robbing the carriages, killing the herdsmen, taking away the anti-inflammatory powder that the herdsman brought home, and then throwing away the herdsman's pasture to settle the wounded. From this, it could be inferred that the wounded had a certain status, and the mercenaries could not abandon the wounded. At midnight, there was no light in the Tibetan village. Occasionally, the low whines of the Tibetan mastiffs could be heard. They were protecting the safety of the village. Yi Qian was awakened by the Tibetan mastiff's howls. Because of Heijie, Yi Qian could also tell what the Tibetan mastiff's howls were trying to convey. Now, what they heard was a somewhat violent and anxious warning that a stranger had entered the village. Yang Jin was sleeping soundly. Yi Qian, who was sleeping outside, groped in the dark and picked up the Tibetan girl's clothes that Yang Jin had given her. She put on her shoes, picked up her gun, and quietly walked out of the tent. The village was not big, and it was a nomadic village. Most of the tents were at a certain distance from each other. Yi Qian could tell where the Tibetan mastiff's howls were coming from. She held her gun tightly and the dagger that Yang Jin had given her in her hand. The sound came from the front, which was equivalent to the tents at the entrance of the village. She could faintly hear the angry voice of a woman. Principal Chun had said that Tibetan families were very united and friendly. They rarely quarreled. However, when she heard the angry voice now, she felt a little scared. Domestic violence? No, if it was domestic violence, the Tibetan mastiff would not roar at strangers. Wait. The Tibetan mastiff that had been howling just now was now silent. Chapter 284. When Yi Qian realized that a stranger who might harm the herdsman had entered the village, she suddenly heard a strange sound coming from her left. Her eyes turned cold and she rolled onto the wet grass to avoid the hand that reached out from behind her. Her reaction scared the J5. This Tibetan girl was too agile. Come out! Yi Qian rolled onto the grass and lay down on the ground below the mani pile. Her eyes were cold as she shouted in Tibetan, "Who is it?" The first sentence was instinctively spoken in Mandarin, and the second sentence was Tibetan that she learned from Yang Jin. When her voice floated out, the 5 people hiding in the darkness were stunned. This voice, it sounded familiar. Han Zheng made a hush sound with his mouth and said to Xia Jinyuan, "Don't you find it familiar? Doesn't it sound like your little fox's voice? Did I hear wrongly? It does sound like her." After a year, her voice was clearer and more imposing, but he wasn't sure. Wasn't Yi Qian in Fujian town? How could she have come here? Thinking about it, it didn't seem possible. I'm not sure. Xia Jinyuan wasn't sure either. He gestured to the 5 people, and they immediately surrounded the mani pile. No matter who it was, as long as she was a citizen, they had to ensure her safety. Yi Qian could already feel that someone was surrounding her, and there was a faint smell of blood on them. There was a slope in front of her, and below her was the problematic tent. There were people surrounding her on both sides, so she could only walk on top of the mani pile. But when she thought of the religious culture of the Tibetan area, Yi Qian gritted her teeth and decided to rush down the problematic tent. If the 5 members of the Snowfield Brigade's Special Forces let a 15-year-old girl like Yi Qian escape, the 5 of them would doubt if they were qualified to be Special Forces soldiers. Xia Jinyuan was the first to make a move. When he saw a slender figure appear, he immediately used his own body to pounce on Yi Qian and grabbed one of Yi Qian's ankles with both hands. With a forceful trip, Yi Qian, who had rushed out, also fell to the ground. He didn't fall straight down. Instead, he bent his arms and fell on the wet grass in an extremely professional posture. Yi Qian grabbed his right foot. As he fell, his left foot kicked down. After failing to kick off, he placed both hands on the ground and rotated his body in a scissor kick style, facing the starry sky in an attempt to counterattack. However, Yi Qian was also shocked by the other party's reaction. She moved quickly, but the other party was even faster. Before she could stand up, her ankle was grabbed again. From crawling to protecting the fall, to kicking, and then to using the scissor kick to turn over. The series of movements were not only smooth, but the professional fierceness revealed made the 5 people tremble in fear. Where did this Tibetan girl learn? Xia Jinyuan's shoulder was kicked by Yi Qian. She used a lot of force, and his entire shoulder was in so much pain that his muscles twitched. When Z7 and J5 saw this, they quickly joined the battle and attacked together. They held down Yi Qian's left and right shoulders. Q King, suppress this little snow wolf. Damn, Tibetan girls are indeed hotter than us Han girls. This smell, it's strong. It's hot enough. K7, who was in charge of security, quickly said in Tibetan, Bo Ma, we're not bad people. We're soldiers from the military station. More than a year had passed. Yi Qian was no longer the thin and weak girl from last year. After 2 summers and 1 winter break, under Principal Chen's hellish training, her physical strength and combat skills had improved by leaps and bounds. Even if her shoulders were held down by 2 people, as long as her legs could move, she could still struggle. Chapter 285. When she realized that it was Han Zheng's voice, she froze for a second. It was at this moment that Xia Jinyuan, who was holding on to her ankle, had a chance to retaliate. He muttered, "Excuse me," before he pressed himself against Yi Qian's body and covered her mouth with his hand. Yi Qian was speechless. "You guys have to let her say something." In the eyes of the 5 members of the Snowfield Brigade, they had finally subdued this Tibetan girl who was as fierce as a wild beast. After being pressed down and covered, Yi Qian saw 2 black figures wearing combat helmets appear in front of him. They were dressed in familiar clothes and had a familiar aura, and the person on top of him was a familiar person. With his mouth covered, Yi Qian could only mutter, which meant, "Xia Jinyuan, let go of me." When Yi Qian realized who was on top of him, Xia Jinyuan naturally realized as well. At this moment, Xia Jinyuan wanted to let go, but he couldn't bear to do so. She was so close. Her faint fragrance was like a flower petal gently brushing past the tip of his nose, tugging at his heartstrings and touching his nerves. At this moment, he only wanted to hold on tightly to her fragrance. How could he bear to let go so quickly? Furthermore, this was the second time he was pressing the little fox under his body. As for the feeling, he had to admit that this little fellow had developed quite well after not seeing her for a year. Especially the little ball on her chest. He could feel her softness even though he was wearing a combat uniform and she was wearing a crocodile. Little fox, this is such a big surprise. Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows slightly. Under the starry sky, there was a glimmer in his dark eyes. It was as if stars had fallen into his pupils, shining brightly. He laughed softly and said, "The way we met was also very special. It took 5 of us to deal with you alone. Girl, you have hurt our self-esteem a little." As soon as he spoke, even K7, who was on high alert, wanted to look over. Little fox? Who? Han Zheng shivered inwardly. Damn it, so mushy. Little fox? Why don't you call her little girlfriend? Q King, let me interrupt you. Can't you see that we're all here? Can't you get up first? You're always pressing down on a little girl. Can't you have some self-awareness? You may not be ashamed, but the little girl is. A fine maiden like her is being held down by a big man like you. You're taking all the advantages. Then he said, "Oh my God, why didn't you just say a few words of Mandarin earlier?" Han Zheng let out a long sigh and loosened his grip on Yi Qian's shoulder. "Young lady, why are you out here in the middle of the night instead of sleeping?" "I heard that the Tibetan Mastiff's roar was strange, so I came out to take a look," Yi Qian said softly, a little embarrassed. He then asked Xia Jinyuan, "Does your shoulder hurt?" "I kicked you really hard just now. Lift your shoulder and see if your bones are hurt." She was naturally annoyed. How could she have known that they would be the ones entering the village? After all, that's not right. They were still here, so who was the person in the tent? It couldn't be one of their people. However, It was indeed a pleasant surprise to be able to meet him here. J5 also realized what was going on. He let go of his hand and said slowly, "Oh, little fox. No, it should be a little snow wolf. It's very fierce. It'll take the three of us to take it down." Chapter 286. The three of them took turns. Bah! Yi Qian's eyes widened. This was also a person with a loose tongue. He really had the urge to tape their mouths shut. But it was the truth. J5 and Han Zheng both had loose tongues. Therefore, when he and Han Zheng were in the army, the rest of the brothers would avoid them. Han Zheng released his grip and immediately went on alert with K7. When he heard Yi Qian quietly ask if he hurt Xia Jinyuan, he felt a lump of blood in his throat. "Young lady, you're still concerned about whether he hurts or not. Why don't you care about yourself?" Damn, why was there a sour taste in his mouth? It had been more than a year since anyone cared about him. Two people with sharp tongues were no match for Xia Jinyuan. He had always been thick-skinned in front of Yi Qian. Not only did he not stand up, he even purposely rubbed his hand over Yi Qian's mouth. He chuckled softly and said, "What's wrong? Are you jealous? Keep your thoughts to yourself. The little fox hasn't retracted her sharp claws and teeth. I'm afraid that if I let go, she'll bite you again. I was bitten last time." "You were bitten last time?" Even someone as calm as G3 blinked. It had been at least a year since he was last bitten. Beast. A year ago, the young lady was even smaller. Originally, Yi Qian didn't have any other thoughts. She hadn't seen this dangerous and elegant man for more than a year. To her, he was like a stranger again. In addition, the situation just now was different. He pressed on top of her to subdue her, so how could she have any thoughts? But now that they said that, Yi Qian couldn't help but blush. Before she could calm down, her face was rubbed with his thumb. Yi Qian felt her brain explode. With so many people looking at her, she was so embarrassed that she wanted to dig a hole in the ground. "Xia Jinyuan, other people might not be able to see what you're doing, but she knows." Yi Qian was afraid that he would be misunderstood and shocked by Yi Qian's actions, so he couldn't help but struggle. "If it doesn't hurt, then get up quickly. Didn't you hear what they said?" She twisted her body slightly. Xia Jinyuan pressed his legs tightly against Yi Qian's legs and pretended not to hear her. He said with a faint smile, "Little fox, don't move." Then, he said to Han Zheng and J5 who were closest to him, "She's not your little fox, she's my little fox. You guys, you can just call her by her name. Be polite, don't call her as if you're all very familiar with her. The only person she knows is me. Do you understand?" Yi Qian felt his face heat up even more. He glared at her and gritted his teeth. "Get up quickly. You're so heavy." What was his little fox? When did she become a fox? Hurry up, they're all watching. If he didn't get up now, the little fox would be angry. How sad. He had missed her for more than a year. The surprise of seeing her so unexpectedly made him feel as if flowers had bloomed in spring. Words could not express his feelings at this moment. Unfortunately, it was obvious that his little fox didn't think about him at all. Major Xia, who was thinking about her, used his extremely slow body movements to express how reluctant he was to get up. Even K7, who had a cold personality, was looking at them with interest. TSK, TSK, TSK. When Xia Jinyuan acted like a rascal, he really had the urge to kick him. Chapter 287. But it didn't work. His title as the all-round soldier king wasn't just for show. He was flirting with the girl, but his gaze was like a radar, not missing a single corner. As expected, only an all-round soldier king would be able to handle such a difficult task while talking about love and being on guard at the same time. G3 glanced at him and began to ponder. Bachelors like them. Was it because they weren't shameless enough and weren't bad enough that girls didn't look for them? Should he change his tough guy style and become a rascal one day when he was on vacation? But Q King's shameless way of chasing girls was something he couldn't learn even if he wanted to. Moreover, he definitely couldn't find his little fox-like girl. So, there was no need to think about it. It was hopeless. Yi Qian wasn't as thick-skinned as Xia Jinyuan. She blushed from the intense gazes that swept her back and forth. Her fist landed on his shoulder. Xia Jinyuan, if you don't get up quickly, I'm going to get angry. Gently and quietly, her breath was like orchids spilling on the tip of his nose. It was faintly discernible and extremely seductive. Yes, get up, get up. Of course I have to get up. Aren't I standing up now? Sigh, I actually saw you from so far away. I was too happy and lost my composure. He said jokingly, his hawk-like eyes staring at the moving tent in front of him. He never relaxed. He slowly got up, making Yi Qian have the urge to kick him again. But he asked softly and calmly, "Why did you sneak into the village? This is a no-man's land filled with herdsmen. Did something happen?" When she asked if something had happened, her eyes were even clearer than the stars, bursting with dazzling light. "Do you want to know?" Xia Jinyuan, who finally got up and squatted on the ground to observe, turned his head sideways and looked at Yi Jian, who obviously wanted to follow them. He smiled deeply and said, "That won't do. It's not the guy we met last time." There were some things that couldn't be said easily. Yi Qian pursed his lips, nodded, and didn't ask any more questions. Good girl. She was so obedient to him, like a cub looking for a reassuring hug. Xia Jinyuan's heart softened as he raised his hand and gently rubbed her head. The steel like him gave all his gentleness to this obedient girl in front of him. Let's go back first. I'll come find you later. Actually, Yi Qian had only seen their equipment when she met with Han Zheng last year. He had vaguely mentioned it, so the quick-witted Yi Qian could vaguely guess that they were probably a special forces team. After more than a year of training, Yi Qian, who had learned a lot, immediately understood that the special forces were different from other units. Even if she saw them in action with her own eyes, it didn't mean that she could ask them why they were here. So, Major Xia was thinking too highly of himself. I'm in the 9 o'clock direction, the third tent with the wind horse flag on it. If you need anything, you can come to me. Yi Qian didn't delay their mission. Han Zheng and the other three had already taken action, so she couldn't delay Xia Jinyuan any longer. Last time, he didn't reject her for such a dangerous mission in Australia, but this time, he used such a joking tone to reject her. The danger factor was definitely higher than the mission in Australia. Chapter 288. To be honest, Yi Qian wasn't 100% confident in this operation, because just now, he could see the difference between him and them. He was subdued in an instant and didn't even have a chance to escape. Therefore, he should be aware of his own limitations. Be careful. There are strangers in the tent, but the Tibetan Mastiff that was guarding outside has been taken care of by them. I didn't hear any gunshots or smell any blood. I suspect that someone might have carried the Tibetan Mastiff out to bury it. She was reminding him that there were still people outside. Her meticulous thoughts made Xia Jinyuan's heart soften even more. He didn't let Yi Qian leave immediately. He gestured for her to hide, and the two of them hid behind the mani pile. The moment Yi Jian squatted down, she was shielded behind his left hand. It seemed like a small action, but it made her heart tremble slightly. He was a person who could use both hands, but she knew that his left hand was actually the most agile. His left hand was faster and more agile than his right hand in terms of the speed of the gun and the strength of the attack. Being behind his left hand was safer than being behind his right hand. At the same time, it was equivalent to having two layers of protection in front of her. One was the mani pile and the other was his body. Take this. Xia Jinyuan pulled out a Type 54 pistol from his combat backpack. His low voice was full of joy. I'll leave my back to you, little fox. It was fine to let her observe him for a while. Sigh, he had no choice. Looking at her eyes, he couldn't bear to reject her. Yi Qian raised her hand and gently pushed his left hand back. I have a gun. Principal Chun prepared a Type 54 pistol for me before we set off. And I have a sniper rifle. After a slight pause, she added, I have bullets too. You don't have to worry about me. She couldn't let him worry about her lack of equipment when he was protecting her. Little Fox would never put on a brave front in front of him. Xia Jinyuan understood that and smiled slightly. He whispered to G3 and K7 who were near the tent, there are about 2 people burying the mastiffs outside. How's the situation on your side? Q King, the situation isn't good. There are 4 hostages. G3's cold voice came through the earpiece. You can take care of the 2 players on your side first. Be careful. Yi Qian waited for him to end the call, then leaned closer to him and said softly, I can go back and look for Principal Chun first and find out how many Tibetans there are and how many tents there are. Why don't you wait here for me to go back and ask? It was a good thing that they could learn more about the village as soon as possible. With Xia Jinyuan's slight nod, Yi Jian's crouching figure really looked like a snow wolf walking in a snowy mountain. She disappeared into the darkness vigorously. Xia Jinyuan waited for Yi Qian to leave safely before approaching Han Zheng and the others with his gun. Yi Qian will cooperate with us to figure out how many people we have and how many tents we have. Now let's change the plan slightly. They needed a more detailed annihilation plan. At the same time, they also needed to ensure the safety of all the herdsmen. They still have a lot of bullets. If they are alerted and fight with us, the consequences will be unimaginable. Xia Jinyuan was gentle in front of Yi Qian, but in front of the enemy, he was bloodthirsty and cold. With a serious gaze, he said in a low voice, Let's find out the situation in the tents first. Make sure 1 person enters the tents to protect the hostages. Chapter 289. It's impossible for the 5 of us to do it. The only people who can go in are Yi Qian and Uncle Chun. G3 looked up and was about to express his opinion when J5 held his arm and shook his head gently, indicating for him to continue listening to Q King and Xia Jinyuan's arrangements. In terms of battle command, Q King indeed had a talent that left them in the dust. While Xia Jinyuan was perfecting the annihilation plan, in the tent, Yi Qian stopped Principal Chun from lighting the oil lamp and said softly, I saw Major Xia and the others. There are 5 of them. I'm afraid something happened in the village. Even the Tibetan mastiff in the outermost tent is silent. Uncle Chun, there are strangers in the village, and Major Xia and the others are chasing after the culprit. Now, they need to know how many herdsmen there are in the village and how many tents there are. I'm afraid we'll have to ask Uncle Jia to help us. Also, they need to ensure the safety of the herdsmen. Do you think we should inform the herdsmen so they can be mentally prepared? Just as Xia Jinyuan thought, Yi Qian's meticulous thinking made their plan even more perfect and thorough. Yi Qian was doing his best to help them. Even though they didn't know who they were dealing with, judging from their expressions, the people they were after must be very difficult to deal with. It was even possible that the other party had guns. If they didn't have guns, they wouldn't have to be so careful and cautious. Principal Chun had carried out missions in the Tibetan area before, so he immediately understood that the people who entered the village were definitely not easy to deal with. He said solemnly, It's not a good thing to meet Captain Xia here. The people who came are also not easy to deal with. Lass, pack up our equipment. The bag that contained the sniper rifle had always been placed together with Yi Qian's luggage bag. After taking the bag out, Yi Qian, who had been trained by Uncle Zhen to be familiar with any part of a gun, quickly assembled the sniper rifle without even needing to light a lamp. The gun, the case, the barrel, the handle, and the stock were all in her hand. In less than a minute, she had assembled a sniper rifle. Finally, she installed the night vision scope, and it was a sniper rifle that could be used to snipe at night. After finalizing the plan with his comrades, Xia Jinyuan quickly found the second tent at 9 o'clock. He gave a signal from outside, and Principal Chun lifted the curtain and walked out. The girl is loading guns inside. How serious is the situation? Also, I found out from our conversation that the wife of the leader of the outermost tent is injured, so it's difficult for her to move around. Master Mu was injured? No wonder there was anti-inflammatory powder at the scene. Xia Jinyuan's eyes moved slightly, and he said in a low voice, "There are a total of 7 people, and they are all carrying light weapons. There are 3 XMM-4A1 carbine rifles, 4 M10 Ingram submachine guns, and 1 IMI Barak pistol. Each of them is carrying about 1. Their firepower is level 2. Xia Jinyuan didn't hide this from Principal Chun. If he needed Yi Qian's help, he had to tell him the situation inside. Uncle Chen, I want to know how many herdsmen and tents there are here. After hearing Principal Chen's answer, Xia Jinyuan looked at his comrades who were hiding nearby with a serious expression. There are a total of 14 tents, 72 herdsmen, 23 children, and 19 elderly. It's unrealistic to move them all together, and it will alert the mercenaries. Mercenaries? Principal Chen's eyes darkened. He knew that this was not an ordinary problem. Chapter 290. Facing a mercenary with level 2 firepower, the risk factor is relatively high. Moreover, there are about 5 of them in the tent and 2 outside. If we don't act in time, once the mercenaries notice us, they will definitely fight with us. Then, the safety of the 79 Tibetans in the village will be threatened, and they may even die. What's your plan? If there's anything you need help with, just let me know. I'm quite familiar with this no man's land. I've been here for more than 6 years. Principal Chen's words made Xia Jinyuan respect him. 6 years in the no man's land. Based on Principal Chen's experience, the time he spent on the mission was around 7 to 8 years. That was when the border was in chaos. G3's voice came from inside. He was reporting the situation. A few seconds later, Xia Jinyuan said, "Uncle Chen, there's no movement from the mercenaries now. It's very likely that they are resting in the tent. We have 10 minutes to inform the herdsmen within 20 meters of the tent in front of us. Also, we need to inform the Tibetans. Our guns are not equipped with silencers. Once we fire, the Tibetans will be alerted. We don't have much time. Inform them all within 5 minutes. Principal Chun had no objections to his arrangement. As he nodded, Yi Qian, who had assembled 2 sniper rifles, walked out. Is there anything I can do to help? 2 sniper rifles, I think, will be of some help. Seeing her come out with 2 sniper rifles in high spirits, Xia Jinyuan couldn't help but raise his hand and pat her on the head. He said softly, "You." To her, danger didn't make her afraid, but excited. "You don't speak Tibetan, so little fox, your mission is to first go to the front with me and take care of the other 2 mercenaries. Second, guard the high ground. If you see anyone coming out, immediately snipe." Mercenaries? Is it? Yi Qian's eyes suddenly lit up. Then, without thinking, he said, "They have rich combat experience, are ruthless, and fight for money. Then can I assume that as long as someone comes out with a gun, I can snipe them on the spot? Of course, I will see the hostages clearly." "Yes, except for the hostages, you can snipe everyone." Xia Jinyuan smiled as he looked at Yi Qian's bright eyes. He took out 2 items from the first aid kit and handed them to Principal Chun. "If you can light a lamp, light it first so that we can see the furnishings inside clearly. These are anti-inflammatory drugs and hemostatic drugs, just what they need." After handing over the medicine, Xia Jinyuan said in a low voice, "On the way, we found that a herdsman had been killed. All the anti-inflammatory medicine he had with him had been taken away by the mercenaries. It meant that someone in the mercenary group was injured, and anti-inflammatory drugs were an urgent necessity. Headmaster Chen's face darkened when he heard that a herdsman was killed. He took the medicine and glanced into the tent. He said in a low voice, "Based on the current situation, this group of people won't kill in the village for the time being. They will rest tonight and leave the next day. Would there be a massacre at the moment? Would there be a massacre after they had rested enough and left?" No one knew, so it had to be solved immediately. Yi Qian pursed his lips. Dai Qing frowned and said to Xia Jinyuan, "Uncle Chen's knee has been hurting these days. I'll go and see." Chapter 291. Girl, if you could speak Tibetan, it would be appropriate for you to go, s. Only the Tibetans closest to the 6 tents woke up. After hearing what was going on, they picked up their trident guns and wanted to fight with the mercenaries who dared to hurt the herdsmen in the village. The herdsmen were brave. If it wasn't for Uncle Tsiza, who was from the Tibetan army, there was no way to stop them. Principal Chun put on his Tibetan uniform and a hat. He looked no different from a Tibetan. Plus, he could speak Tibetan fluently. As G3 and the others held their breaths, the world-class snipe, but you don't. Principal Chun took the medicine and smiled. "I've been out of the army for so many years. I don't have the spirit of a young soldier like you. Girl Jian, work with Captain Xia to get rid of the people outside. Listen to Captain Xia's orders." No matter what kind of battle it was, when the battle plan was set, the commander was the soul of the battle. They had to listen to him and couldn't make decisions on their own. Xia Jinyuan could see that Yi Qian was worried about going in alone. He said softly to Principal Chun, "Don't worry, we have a way to get the people inside out. Uncle Chun going in is equivalent to protecting the hostages inside." Yi Qian was a little relieved when he said that. It seemed that they had a plan. This was a secret battle that couldn't be disturbed. Principal Chun and Uncle Tsiza bent over and started to inform the sleeping Tibetaner walked calmly towards the tent. Principal Chun, who was standing outside the tent, raised his voice. His voice was clear and there was no trace of fear in it. K7 became the translator. He translated what Principal Chun said in a low voice. "Is Dima here? I brought back the medicine you asked me to bring. You came back so late. You met a snow wolf at night and almost lost your life. Fortunately, I had a trident gun that allowed me to come back alive." After translating, K7 said in a low voice, "This is a master. Is he retired from the frontline Tibetan army? He already went in. That's amazing." There were 2 meanings in one sentence. First, he came to deliver the medicine because he came back late. Second, he had a trident gun in his hand and could fight the snow wolf. That was why K7 said it was an expert talking. After Xia Jinyuan heard this, he smiled gently at Yi Qian and said, "All the brothers respect Uncle Chun. Little Fox, we don't have much time. Take care of the first 2 in 5 minutes. What do you think?" The less time they spent outside, the more they could ensure Principal Chen's safety. Naturally, Yi Qian hoped to resolve this matter as soon as possible. The snowy wind in the no-man's land blew close to the snowy mountains. At night, the wind howled like a monster, emitting a power that made people tremble. It was this kind of wind that not only concealed the sound of footsteps, but also brought the thick stench of blood to his side. It was the blood of a Tibetan mastiff. They had used some unknown method to kill the Tibetan mastiff. Hearing the sound of the stone falling, Yi Qian could not help but bite his lower lip. Through the night vision goggles, Xia Jinyuan, who had finished observing the situation, quietly whispered into Yi Qian's ear. The faint scent of mint and manliness enveloped her. "I'll take the right, you take the left. Let's attack together." He extended his clenched fist between the 2 of them. Yi Qian's lips curled up. He extended his fist. The big fist and the small fist lightly bumped together. The 2 of them moved to the left and right sides, each holding a military multipurpose bayonet. What the two of them needed to do was to silently take care of the two mercenaries who were about to return. Chapter 292. In order to match Yi Qian's speed, Xia Jinyuan slowed down his footsteps by half a beat. He waited for the rocks to fly up, then his slender figure and her slender figure appeared behind the two mercenaries at the same time. Yi Qian's eyes were filled with ruthlessness. For Xia Jinyuan and the others to chase after the culprits, they must be unforgivable, not to mention that they had killed a herdsman. The wind was howling, as if it was adding momentum to the upcoming life and death battle. Every fight was a matter of life and death. No matter the situation, staying calm was the key to a battle of life and death. In close combat, not only did the opponent not have a chance to shoot, but they also did not have a chance to shoot. Therefore, it was important to stay calm and not panic. "Soldier! Damn it!" One of the mercenaries cursed in an unknown language and threw a fist at Yi Qian. Soon, he realized that the person who dared to fight with him was actually a girl, and he burst into laughter. The biggest taboo on the battlefield was to underestimate the enemy. Facing Yi Qian, he had underestimated him from the beginning. For Yi Qian, this was a good thing, and her performance was also showing weakness. Yi Qian had memorized how to use his advantage on the battlefield from the beginning of training. He did not dare to forget. There was indeed a great disparity in strength, but it was not that Yi Qian was weaker than the other party. From the beginning of the fight, he could tell that the other party's training was not professional. Moreover, leaving the tent and risking being discovered to abandon the Tibetan Mastiff showed that their status was average. In the mercenary army, there was a certain disparity in status. The dagger in his hand swept across with a gust of wind, and he could feel the sharp blade cutting through his skin. The battle of life and death was just that cruel. It was either you die or I die. Xia Jinyuan was fast and fierce. After a few sweeps, the dagger in his hand had pierced deeply into the other party's thigh. Before he could pull it out, the other party roared in pain and elbowed him hard in the head. This was a professionally trained mercenary. He surrounded Xia Jinyuan from both sides. Through the night vision goggles, he deliberately chose Xia Jinyuan and left the weaker one to Yi Jian. Xia Jinyuan was hit hard in the head. He felt a buzzing sound in his head. Relying on his instinct, he swung his fist and punched the man in the nose. When a person's nose was hit, not only would they subconsciously close their eyes, their brain would also go blank for a few seconds due to the pain. In those few seconds, Xia Jinyuan, as a soldier who had undergone rigorous training, performed bravely and fearlessly. Even though his brain had suffered a heavy blow, he was still able to accurately grasp the dagger in his opponent's thigh. He pulled it out and warm blood spurted out, staining his combat glove. The mercenary screamed. He raised his uninjured right foot and kicked Xia Jinyuan in the chest again. Unfortunately, his injured left leg slowed him down and he could not fight back. Xia Jinyuan, who did not retreat, directly used his right arm to block the other party's kick. He needed to finish off this trapped mercenary on the spot. Xia Jinyuan's entire right arm was in so much pain that his face tensed up. In the next second, he leaped up and stabbed the bloody dagger into the other party's neck again. Under the combat gloves, the muscles and bones on the back of his hand were exposed. He was exerting force, forcefully twisting the dagger that was stuck in the other party's neck. This was a fatal blow, one that left the other party with no chance of survival. Chapter 293. There was only coldness on Qing Ya's elegant face. She pulled out the military dagger that had crushed the opponent's throat. The blood was like a flower blooming in the snow and wind. In the darkness, the blood became one with the night sky and fell to the ground. The blood splattered on his face, and when it was blown by the wind, it condensed into blood frost on his face. Xia Jinyuan, who had just killed a mercenary, didn't have time to wipe off the blood frost on his face. He turned around and walked towards Yi Qian. However, he heard Yi Qian shout, "Go and support Uncle Chen, quick!" With her own strength, Yi Jian knew that she could get rid of this mercenary who was not very strong. At the same time, she also saw how dangerous the fight between Xia Jinyuan and the dead mercenary was. She was very worried that the mercenaries left in the tent were all strong and powerful. Uncle Chen's shoulder and knee were suffering from rheumatism. How could he be a match for them? Go. Don't make me worry. Yi Jian's clear voice was like a cold sword in autumn water, breaking through the wind and reaching his ears with a cold ruthlessness. Her dark eyes were filled with frost. Even her gaze was like Xia Jinyuan's, fierce and ruthless. Her eyes were filled with determination. In the face of life and death, in the face of a race against the Grim Reaper, her performance was the performance of an outstanding soldier. She would never back down. Little fox, remember, you are a soldier. You must know your mission and responsibility. You are not allowed to panic under any circumstances. Do you know what a soldier is? A soldier is the country's last line of defense, and also the line of defense that walks at the forefront. He didn't come over, but his voice traveled over. His low voice was filled with biting cold, and every word traveled into Yi Qian's ears. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left without hesitation. Because Xia Jinyuan knew that his little fox was like a wolf cub that had left the pack and was using its own strength to hunt. She was using her strength to prove that there was nothing wrong with her. His words were just to tell her that even if she killed him personally, it was because he was a soldier, a line of defense for the motherland. There was no need for her to have any psychological barriers. To this day, Xia Jinyuan still remembered that more than a year ago in Australia, when she saw Yi Qian's hesitant expression when he killed someone for the first time, he had solemnly and sternly told her that it was an honor for a soldier to fight for the country, even if their hands were stained with blood. It was Yi Qian's first time fighting without anyone by his side. Even if something happened, there would be no one to support Yi Qian. It was also something he had to go through. As soon as Xia Jinyuan left, Yi Qian calmed down and began to attack fiercely. Fighting for the country, even if their hands were stained with blood, they would still feel glorious. He put away the military dagger in his hand and gently swiped his wrist. The end of the silver wire that had been hidden all this time fell into his hand. This was the beginning of Yi Qian's counterattack. He was using his own abilities to deal with a mercenary. The moment the silver wire in his hand wrapped around the mercenary's neck, Yi Qian stepped on a 20-centimeter rock and leaped into the air. Like an eagle spreading its wings, he leaped over the mercenary's head and wrapped the silver wire tightly around the mercenary's neck. With one end wrapped around his arm, no matter how hard the mercenary struggled, he pulled out the military dagger and stabbed forward. Amidst the roars, Yi Qian heard gunshots coming from the front. The battle had begun. Yi Jian forcefully pushed the dagger into the mercenary's body. As the mercenary roared even louder and struggled even harder, Yi Jian's entire body was instantly flung out and she fell onto the sharp stone beach. The silver wire wrapped around her arm showed no signs of loosening. She didn't immediately get up. Instead, she planted her feet on the rocks and pulled out her pistol. Along with the gunshots coming from the front, Yi Qian fired the first of his 12 bullets. Chapter 294. Bang! After the gunshot, the silver wire wrapped around her arm suddenly lost its strength. Her blood seemed to have drifted into the snow and wind, turning into bloody snow beads that fell on her face. All of this happened as the mercenary from an unknown country fell to the ground with a thud. Yi Qian ended this one-man fight. The metallic smell of blood was stronger than before. Yi Qian gently closed her eyes and took a deep breath. After resting, she felt a burning pain on her back. She had been thrown to the ground just now and her back had rubbed against the sharp rocks. She was afraid that her flesh had been injured. She took a deep breath and exhaled a long breath. as if she was exhaling all the blood that had floated into her chest. "It's nothing. This is the path you chose, and it's also the path you must go through," she murmured softly and adjusted her panting breathing. When she retracted the silver wire and wrapped it around her wrist, her beautiful face was as calm as before. "The path you must go through, you are good, they are evil." As Xia Jinyuan said, soldiers were the last line of defense of the motherland. Fighting for the country and the people was righteous and good. In front, the gunshots were particularly fierce. Yi Qian rushed to the front of Uncle Tsija's tent. The sound of the bullets seemed to have brushed past her scalp. She rushed to the tent entrance and shouted, "Yang Jin." After hearing the answer from inside, she entered the tent. Yang Jin recognized the voice of the Han Chinese girl who came to stay in her house. She walked out from the dark and said quickly, "It's very dangerous outside. Where are you going?" The only thing she could understand was, "Where are you going?" "Be careful, hide well." "I'm going out." Yi Qian used the Tibetan language she had learned to gently remind Yang Jin, who was lying in a corner of the ground. She picked up the sniper rifle left in the tent and went to the sniping spot. She set up the gun, put her eyes close to the night vision sight, adjusted the distance, and searched for the target in the green world. A man in Tibetan clothing entered his line of sight. He zoomed in and slowly focused on him. As the other party retreated, he could see that the man in Tibetan clothing would cover his waist with his hands from time to time. Xia Jinyuan had said that a high-ranking member of the mercenary group was injured. At this time, she found that this Tibetan not only did not hide in the tent, but had been looking for a hiding place outside. His whereabouts were already very suspicious. However, he couldn't just assume that there was something wrong with the other party based on his own guesses. He didn't immediately take action and turn off the red laser. He just kept aiming at the other party. Perhaps it was because the herdsmen were all brave. No matter how loud the gunshots were outside, no one ran out in a panic. In this area, they believed in the uniformed soldiers. In the eyes of the herdsmen, the soldiers guarding the border were their guardians. Every year, they would offer countless hada as a sign of their passion and respect. It was this kind of trust that made them choose to stay in the tent and wait for the gunshots outside to pass. What did the soldiers fight for? Naturally, it was for their country and the people they protected. Every bullet that was fired was a sign of their fearlessness. They were fighting bravely without fear of death. Yi Qian hadn't put on his military uniform yet, but he had already placed himself above the soldiers. He believed that he was a soldier from the bottom of his heart. When he saw Han Zheng holding a gun and chasing in the direction where the man in Tibetan clothing was hiding, he didn't hesitate to pull the trigger of his sniper rifle. The laser flashed and the bullet was fired. Chapter 295. In 0.3 seconds, the brain of the target, who was still hiding, was pierced by the sharp bullet. After a few centimeters, the bullet burst out of the brain and pierced through the tent with the remaining force, landing somewhere unknown. The target was lying on the side. In order to hit the target with one shot, Yi Qian chose the most brutal way of sniping. The sound of the gunshot made Han Zheng stop in his tracks. He seemed to have thought of something. He glanced at the high ground and made an OK gesture. He then pointed to the front and signaled Yi Qian to snipe the second target. The sound of the sniper bullet didn't sound too out of place in the gunfight. Han Zheng informed all his comrades of Yi Qian's position through his earpiece. Successfully sniped the first target. There's still one more person, little fish. Lure him outside. Yi Qian is at the high ground. He can take care of little fish in a minute. The death of the leader of the mercenaries was a good thing for the comrades of the Snowfield Brigade. Xia Jinyuan adjusted his earpiece and said, "What are Yi Qian's coordinates?" Z7, report. After Han Zheng reported Yi Qian's coordinates and direction, Yi Qian saw Han Zheng make another gesture through the night vision scope. "There's a target at 10 o'clock. Requesting sniping." She immediately aimed her sniper rifle at the 10 o'clock direction and aimed. Soon, she saw a black shadow moving slowly among a pile of rocks. The corner of Yi Jian's mouth curled up slightly. The crosshair of the scope firmly locked onto the target and moved along with the target's movements. The 7.62mm bullet flew out of the fireproof cap and flew straight at a distance of about 300 meters. Her sniper rifle had a range of 800 meters. With the wind speed at a distance of 300 meters and Yi Qian's calculations, the sharp bullet pierced through the air and hit the target in the back. The target was hit within 300 meters. The shooting stopped and the butter lamps in the tent lit up one by one. It was very calm. It was as if the herders had just woken up. There were no panic screams or cries of fear. They were the descendants of heroes, so they were very calm in the gunfight. When Yi Qian came down with his sniper rifle, he saw a black shadow standing quietly on the rocky beach. Behind him was a majestic snowy mountain. He was like a snowy mountain. He stood there quietly with a majestic aura. He made people feel at ease. He made people feel that he could protect the peace of the area. Xia Jinyuan now, he was even more charming than he was a year ago. He was wise and calm in the face of enemies. He fought side by side with him. No matter how dangerous the road ahead, he was willing to walk with Yi Qian. There was no way back, only forward. With him around, no matter how tough it was, they could walk side by side. This was Xia Jinyuan's charm. His charm was incomparable. Little fox, are you admiring the night view? Or are you waiting for me to walk over? She stood not far away and did not move. Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows and smiled. His black eyes were as bright as the stars, rippling gently. I think you're waiting for me to walk over and give me a warm hug. He could quickly walk out of the smoke and fire of war and be himself again. Yi Qian heard this and immediately jumped over a rock. Unexpectedly, he felt a tearing pain in his back. The sudden pain came. Even Yi Jian, who had always been able to endure it, couldn't help but gasp. It seemed that the injury was a little serious, especially the side of the waist. It seemed that the skin and flesh had split open. Chapter 296. The sound of pain was particularly clear in the quiet night. Xia Jinyuan, who had been smiling, immediately put away his smile and walked over. Sit down. Where are you hurt? He put his arm around her shoulders and turned on the headlights on his helmet. In the light, they could see Yi Qian's beautiful face and his elegant, handsome face. Yi Qian didn't even have a chance to refuse before he helped her sit on the rock. It was late at night. The rock was really cold. In August, the temperature in the no-man's land would drop to a few degrees below zero. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a phenomenon where blood spurted out and fell to the ground. Soon, Xia Jinyuan also realized that it wasn't appropriate to sit on the cold rock in the cold wind to check where she was hurt. He smiled and said, "Sorry, I'm used to being rough in the military camp. I'm a little, not very good at taking care of girls. Please forgive me." This was definitely the truth. As Han Zheng said, Xia Jinyuan was born into an aristocratic family. He was humorous and witty, but he had always been conservative when it came to relationship. At 21 years old, he really wasn't good at taking care of girls. Yi Qian wouldn't let him take care of her. As soon as his hand left her, she immediately stood up and said, "It's not a big problem. Maybe it's just a scratch. Aren't you going to clean it up? They're all busy downstairs. You haven't gone back yet. How can I be at ease?" Her refusal made Xia Jinyuan's lips curve slightly. "Come, make a choice. Do you want to carry her? Or carry her on your back? Pick one of the two. There's no third option." Yi Qian. Why does he like to act shamelessly in front of me? She tightened her grip on the sniper rifle and looked away with a faint smile. "No, I can walk on my own." What a headache. She wasn't really a 15-year-old girl. How could she deal with Xia Jinyuan? She couldn't do anything about it. She couldn't be as cold as she was with Yi Jifan's family, and she couldn't be too enthusiastic either. She wanted to maintain a gentlemanly friendship, but he liked to cross the line. No matter how smart Yi Qian was, she had no idea how to deal with relationships between men and women. When faced with Major Xia, who was acting shamelessly and teasing her from time to time, she couldn't do anything about it. That won't do. Just now, every step you took was so painful that you gasped. We're still a few hundred meters away from the village. Won't you feel pain every step you take? He smiled at the little girl who kept trying to find ways to reject him. Even though his deep gaze was deep and gentle, it was just the right amount of a man. Calm. Yi Jian looked up and stared at him. The major, who had just finished a battle, had not taken off his helmet. The light shone on him, revealing his elegance and elegance, just like that of a noble young master. His silhouette was perfect, and his eyes were clear. There was a warmth deep in his eyes that could drown people. This Xia Jinyuan vividly expressed the delicate feelings and tenderness of a soldier. Her eyelids drooped slightly, and she smiled helplessly. Captain Xia, I did choose the third option. But I don't have a third option. Xia Jinyuan maintained the smile she was most familiar with. It was elegant, noble, and especially dangerous. Just when Yi Qian thought he would continue to insist that there were only two options, the man who had always been unpredictable said slowly, "However, I've always respected girls. Okay, tell me what your third option is." "Oh, I know even without you saying it. You can walk on your own, right?" Chapter 297. Yi Jian, who felt that she couldn't keep up with his pace, pursed her lips, took a step forward and said to him, "Indeed, I can walk on my own. As for the road that I can walk on my own, I hope that I can walk it step by step. As long as I can walk on my own, I will persist no matter how difficult it is." Her injury was indeed serious. Just a small step was enough to cause her back muscles to spasm in pain. This time, she was on guard and did not show it. Instead, she took one step after another and brushed past him, once again widening the distance between the two of them. The smell of blood on her body completely exposed Yi Qian's injury. Xia Jinyuan's smile slowly disappeared and his eyes darkened. He turned around and looked at the stubborn figure that brushed past him. He sighed softly. "It's so hard to walk on your own. Silly fox, why don't you think of relying on others? If you continue to walk like this, you will be the only one suffering." Xia Jinyuan chased after her with a slight pain in his heart. She had her third choice. Then, he would give her a fourth choice. Since she had chosen to walk on her own, he would walk with her. Judging from the way she walked, her back was injured. He could not hug or carry her, so he could only help her carry the gun. After catching up, Xia Jinyuan melted all his helplessness into a smile. "Come, give me the gun. We can walk slowly." Not only did he leave her with some dignity, but he also showed his respect for her. Yi Qian did not refuse again. If he did, he would seem pretentious and pretentious. He handed the gun over and smiled. Helping each other on the battlefield is also a form of friendship. "Thank you. For now, I don't think we are comrades." Xia Jinyuan took the heavy sniper rifle and raised his eyebrows slightly. He jokingly said, "The army would not dare to recruit an underage soldier like you." Yi Qian glanced at him. "Didn't you say we were comrades? Why did you change your mind so quickly? It seems like you don't understand what a comradeship is. Just now I said that I would give you two choices. If it were Hanzheng, there wouldn't be a second choice." When it came to education and brainwashing, Xia Jinyuan had always been good at both. As such, he began to explain to Yi Qian what comradeship was. "You were injured, so it was necessary for me to help you. This is also a reflection of the camaraderie between comrades. In the end, you rejected me without a second word. Little fox, you're the one who rejected my comradeship first." He had to let her know that trusting him and giving him her hand was not a difficult thing to do. If she was too tired, she could rely on him for a while. If Yi Qian was really a 15 or 16-year-old girl, she would definitely be fooled by his serious tone. Fortunately, she wasn't. Therefore, he maintained his composure and answered, "Captain Xia, I haven't seen you for more than a year, and your ability to fool people has improved a lot. What is comradeship? Other than helping each other, there is also encouragement. I encourage my comrades to face difficulties and overcome them. Just like what I did just now, you wouldn't have given Han Zheng a second choice because you knew he would persevere. That's why this little girl said I was a fox. She saw things clearly at such a young age. She even knew what comradeship was. She must have done some research." Chapter 298. But you're a special exception, so I can't treat everyone equally. Xia Jinyuan laughed heartily. His handsome eyes were as bright as the moon in the sky. If he continued, it would be a complete rejection. He had to stop talking about this topic. After thinking about it, he naturally changed the topic. "When you really wear the military uniform one day, I will definitely treat everyone equally." Yi Qian also secretly breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She was really afraid that he would say something else that would make her want to run away. One was an astonishingly talented hunter, the other was a cunning and intelligent fox. This was destined to be an evenly matched contest. Sorrowful cries came from the tent. It was Dima's wife crying. She already knew that her husband had been killed. Yi Qian stopped in her tracks and looked sadly at the tent where the cries came from. She remembered that once her mother also cried like this. It was after her father died in an accident, her mother hugged her and cried. Not long after, the gentle and beautiful mother in her memory no longer came back with a smile. Instead, she was covered by a national flag and returned to the village as a small jar. Although she had memories at that time, she did not know what sacrifice was. When she arrived at Yi Jifan's house, she was dragged into the kitchen by Sun Dongqing and beaten with a stick for the first time because she snatched an egg from Sun Dongqing. Only then did she know that she had become an orphan without parent. In her previous life, because she knew early, she was afraid early and developed a cowardly character that did not dare to fight with Yi Ying. Don't underestimate the Tibetans. They are a brave people. Even if Dima is not around, his wife will still take care of this family. Her sadness made Xia Jinyuan raise his hand and gently rub her hair. Everything will be fine. There is no hurdle in this world that cannot be overcome. You were able to grit your teeth and walk away from Yi Jifan's family to live a wonderful life. Dima's wife is a mother and will also be strong for her child. Yi Qian nodded gently and did not say anything. She silently returned to Uncle Xija's tent. Xia Jinyuan was afraid that Little Fox was so sad because she thought about her past. He had sent her to the tent and was about to leave to deal with the follow-up matters in the team. However, he changed his mind at the last minute and chose to stay with her. As she turned around, she did not see Xia Jinyuan's downcast eyes. He sighed and felt sorry for her because of her sadness. He glanced at the swaying shadows in front of him and the nomads standing outside the tent. Xia Jinyuan pressed down on his headset and said to the team members who were cleaning up, "Yi Qian is injured, so I'll accompany her for a while. After cleaning up, accompany the herdsman to the rocky beach and bring the unfortunate Dima back to the village. If there's anything we can help with, we'll do our best to help the Dimas." G3 and the others were cleaning up the corpses of the 7 mercenaries. From the investigation to the registration, they had to be very careful. Hearing this, they said in a low voice, "We'll take care of the rest. Take good care of Yi Qian." After all, it was rare to meet a girl who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the male soldiers. Moreover, she was still a student. Yi Qian walked into the tent. The adults were not there. Only Yang Jin was sitting alone in front of the butter lamp. There was an unsheathed waist knife on the table and a three-pronged gun next to it. Seeing Yi Qian come in, Yang Jin immediately got up to greet him and asked, "Are you okay? I was very worried about you." Soon, she saw the strange man who came in after him and stopped in her tracks. Chapter 299. Yi Qian walked up to her and hugged her gently. Since they couldn't communicate in Tibetan, they could only express their feelings through body language. Yang Jin, who had gone to primary school, didn't know how to speak Mandarin. She hugged Yi Qian gently and looked at him curiously. She only looked away when he smiled at her. "Her back is injured. You need to be gentler." Xia Jinyuan, who was standing behind them, smiled and communicated with Yang Jin in Tibetan. "Next, I need to treat her wound." What Yi Jian could understand was that he was saying, "Thank you, sorry for bothering you." When she was about to ask Yang Jin to help her again, the enthusiastic Tibetan girl said a string of sutras and left the tent with her sutras like a butterfly fluttering in the grassland in June. Once Yang Jin left, Yi Qian frowned slightly. "My back is injured. Captain Xia, it's not appropriate for you to stay." She was really vigilant, as if she was afraid of what he would do. "Why are you afraid of an injured little fox?" He picked up the sniper rifle beside him and didn't mention Yi Qian's injury. Instead, he asked, "Where should I put it after removing it? Give me the bag." Yi Qian didn't feel relieved when he didn't mention it. Instead, he felt even more uncomfortable. "I'll do it myself. Can you go out first? I want to treat my wound myself. Let's see how it goes." "Weren't you very strong on the mountain just now? Why are you in such a hurry to treat your wound now?" He sat cross-legged on the sheepskin rug on the ground and removed the sniper rifle from his hand. He looked up and saw Yi Qian still standing there. He couldn't help but smile and teased, "What's wrong? Did I make you angry?" His handsome face was full of confusion. He didn't seem to understand what Yi Qian wanted to do. What did he want to do? Yi Qian couldn't explain it himself. But Xia Jinyuan was sitting there and not leaving. It wasn't good. How was she supposed to take off her clothes? She clearly said that she wanted to treat her own wound. She didn't believe that she didn't understand. However, with the way he was acting, it would seem that she was overthinking if she said anything else. Yi Jian was a little discouraged. "Captain Xia, don't play dumb in front of me. My meaning is very clear. I need to ask you to leave now because—" She was a little embarrassed, but she still enunciated each word clearly, "because I want to take off my clothes." "You want me, a 15-year-old girl, to take off my clothes in front of an adult man like you?" In return, he laughed heartily. His deep and handsome eyes seemed to reflect thousands of mountains and rivers. "Firstly, the person I asked Yang Jin to invite hasn't arrived yet. Secondly, you're injured on your back. It's not convenient for you to treat the wound yourself. Thirdly," he looked Yi Qian up and down from head to toe, then met her gaze like a gentleman. "I still know what it means to look away from indecent things." The sadness in her eyes had disappeared, and she had returned to being a strong and energetic girl. Also, in the past, the little girl's eyes would inadvertently reveal a trace of hostility towards the opposite sex, and there was also a haze that was not easy to detect. This time, other than the clarity in her eyes, the haze that seemed to have been there for many years had completely disappeared. She didn't hide it deeper, but it had truly disappeared. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.